done something dumb.
Okay. Let me make an announcement here. Good morning, everybody. If you have, we've got about 2 minutes. Moving towards your seats, please. Can everybody take your seats, please?
Okay, so you want to turn off?
Okay.
I'm busy. Grab a drink.
Good morning, everybody. It is 15 seconds after 9 a.m. Welcome, and thanks for being prompt. Appreciate that. I've got a full agenda this morning. We'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Let's start with introductions. My name is Norm Steen, Taylor County Commissioner, and your chair. Jill?
Jill Gabler, Colorado Springs.
Thank you, Neil Levy, Woodland Park.
Buenos dias, Yolanda Avila, Colorado Springs.
Danny Pico, Colorado Springs.
Ken Jeray, Manitou Springs.
Turner Smith, Rima.
Gary Faust, Palmer Lake.
Dick Elsner, Park County.
Colonel Rod Beard, United States Air Force Academy.
Ron Javery, Director of Staff, 50th Space Wing, Schriever Air Force Base.
Colonel Sam Johnson, Peterson Air Force Base.
Rocky Scott, Colorado Transportation Commissioner.
Hal Allgaier, Fort Carson.
Terry Storm, Chamber of Commerce and EDC Military Affairs Council.
Bruce Davis, City of Victor.
Andy Gunning, PPACG.
Holly Williams, El Paso County. And Secretary.
Yeah, again, thank you, and appreciate you taking time today for some important topics today. We'll accept an agenda, or a motion to accept the agenda, please.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes. Thank you. Public comments. Anybody make a public comment items on the agenda or not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll close it.
Mr. Chair, if I could real quick, I want to introduce Jody Barker.
Oh, yes.
Jody may make his way up here and just make a brief announcement as well. But as you know, we had a transition with our AAA director position with Joe Urban's retirement. Jody joined us about 2 weeks ago now, so he's jumped right into it. You may know Jody from the Central Colorado chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, where he was before he joined us, and before that with the Senior Center here in Colorado Springs. So he's got a lot of connections throughout the community. Super thrilled to have him on board, and he's just going to make a couple of brief announcements.
Welcome, Jody.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to make a quick announcement, just an update. As you may know, you may be hearing that we're about to go into open enrollment. That's just October 15th through December 7th. that is an extremely busy time of year around here. So just wanted to let you know that's going to be happening. CMS, Medicare, has made some significant changes to the Medicare Plan Finder. That's the software that our case managers and SHIP folks use to help sign people up for their Medicare plans and options and coverages. The challenge with that is that now everyone must have a mymedicare.gov sign in, and so that allows our counselors to access their information more readily, more completely. And so we've devised a system here in the office to allow people to sign in, get that ready to go so that their time with the counselors is better used. We're going to be providing that volunteer assistance for those folks. If they don't have computer access at home, we will be letting the community know that if they have that before they get here, they can get through the system a little bit faster. But to allow for those folks who don't have computer access at home or elsewhere, we're going to be setting that up with the team that we have, our IT department, volunteer coordinators. Everyone's on board to help make that happen. And then we're also going to be providing a variety of open enrollment events in several of our SHIP rural counties. As you know, we serve a 9-county area through our SHIP department, and so that includes Huerfano, Las Animas, Chaffee, Fremont, and eastern El Paso counties. That's not the entire SHIP area, but those are the specific rural areas that we're going to be providing some outreach to. And then as you came in our downstairs door, just wanted to highlight, if you didn't see it on your way in, take a look on your way out. We have a lobby screen rotating with some updated information so that we can communicate to folks as they come in. So if you have any questions about any of that, please feel free to stop by my office or see me after this meeting. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Welcome. Great to have you, Jody. Our next section is consent items. There are 3 items there. Anybody like to pull one of those 3 items off for discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent?
Move approval of the consent items.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those passed. Thank you. Information items 5A, update to the two-way water quality management plan.
Okay, Samantha Bailey is going to kick it off and introduce our consultants that are here to present for you today.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, members of the board. For the past year, PPACG staff and members of our Water Quality Management Committee have been working diligently to update the Regional Water Quality Plan, also known as a 208 plan, as it's required by the Clean Water Act. I'm excited to announce that WQMC, our Water Quality Management Committee, approved the 2019 update of the 208 plan on October 1st. Brown & Caldwell, an environmental engineering firm, was hired in 2018 to assist PPACG in the coordination and development of our updated plan. Next, we'll present this to our today we'll provide you with a presentation to overview the 208 plan and answer any questions you may have. Next, we'll present this to our Community Advisory Committee for approval, which is scheduled for October 30th, then bring this back to you as a consent item in November. So I'm happy to introduce to you Brown & Caldwell with Andrew Newhart and Samantha Kepley.
Good morning. If I knew what I was getting into today, I might have worn a jacket or something. But unfortunately, Sam's not here with me. She's been really driving a lot of this with Sam Bailey and with Andy. But just a couple of quick slides about what we've been up to and what we're doing. If I can get this set there. All right. Didn't even have to click it. So the water management plan, the 208 plan, this is a planning document for the region as far as it comes to water quality control, approving wastewater treatment facilities, designs and site approval locations. The 208 plan is to provide a little bit of information to help coordinate all these activities. You've got somebody who wants to put in a wastewater treatment plant over here in this neighborhood or could maybe better connect to a larger system. This document helps you all wade through kind of some of those decisions as to where something should go. The plan for here covers El Paso, Teller, and Park counties as seen on the map. Also, it's a little more complicated because it covers a couple different watersheds. You got the South Platte Basin headwaters up here, obviously draining to the north. And you got Fountain Creek, Chico Creek, everything that drains down to the Arkansas River. Element of the plan, just to identify what sort of treatment works are in the area, what sort of facilities that may be discharging to the various watersheds. Looking at how that all ties into a regulatory program. Identification of what agencies may have sort of control or input over some of these, whether it's a water quality agency, stormwater, whomever. And then being able to consider non-point sources and non-point sources of pollution. The plan for this area was last updated in 2010. Currently, there is a grant from the Department of Public Health and Environment to help put this thing together, which is where Brown and Caldwell came in. We do a lot of stuff with the Water Quality Division, regulatory permits, standards, actions, kind of stuff like that. So we were hired to come in and help organize this thing, not to write the plan, but to help bring it all together. So this kicked off, about a year ago, Andy? Something like that. We got in a lot of the original members who did the last plan update in 2010. There are a couple new ones as well in here helping to put this together, helping to update all the information that goes into this. We've had several meetings over the course of the last year, met with the division on occasion here to just see if we're on the right track, see what they wanted included in the plan. Good thing is that when this is done, it does have to go in front of the Water Quality Control Commission, but it doesn't go to EPA anymore for approval. So the state's just kind of bypassing that whole process at this point in time. We've had a lot of discussions as to how big, how comprehensive we want this plan to be. I think the last one was, I don't know, yay thick, super big. We've cut a lot of information out of it, just made it a little easier, a little more streamlined. Getting to the actual kind of decision-making process and information that needs to be reviewed, needs to be evaluated when you're going through and looking at a site approval or a design approval for a certain facility. The main focus, I didn't realize there was a bullet coming in on the bottom. The main focus is to preserve and to improve water quality. So we're looking at, what is the health of our streams right now? What is the water quality characteristics of them? Are they impaired? Are they not impaired? How do we improve that? Or how do we keep the status quo moving forward? So some of the changes we have made, updating the population projections for the area. Any updates to regional policies have been incorporated. Looking at the major water quality issues for each watershed, that does change over time. You might have a certain stream segment that might be impaired for selenium for a while, and then improvements are made and it's no longer impaired for selenium. Revised descriptions of what point source discharges are out there, design capacities, how much they're discharging, what the area is that they serve, looking at the watershed sections and updating water quality information, looking at non-point sources. And then, of course, the big thing is these conclusions and recommendations for each watershed. How do we keep water quality up? How do we improve water quality? All right. So this is kind of the timeline that we were following as we were going through this. Knowing we have to make a revision to the plan, getting approval, or actually revising the plan, getting approval by the Water Quality Management Committee. We're here today in front of the Board of Directors for you guys to look at this and discuss this. The next two steps that are coming up is to actually submit the revised plan to CDPHE for review. So their engineering section, their non-point source section will take a look at this document and make sure it has everything that they want into it. And then eventually we're going to go in front of the Water Quality Commission, present the updates that we've made to the plan, talk to them just a little bit about it, and then they should approve it. And that's all I've got for you. Quick and sweet.
Questions, comments? Yes, Stan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have several water quality boards and other kinds of things that are similar to that are in our community, one of them being the Fountain Creek Watershed District. So how much interface did you have in the revision of this in working with those other districts? Because they deal with this stuff all the time for whatever is within their purview.
Sure thing. We tried to get everybody to the table who wanted to participate at the beginning. getting everybody informed of what was going on, what we were doing, inviting them to come participate. We sent a lot of the various sections of the document to different agencies, different folks, different, the counties, to update their areas of concern. I can't tell you exactly if Fountain Creek participated directly in this or not, but they were invited to come in.
Okay. I'm not sure that's the answer I'm looking for, but okay.
Okay.
And we can find out if they have membership on our Water Quality Management Committee, and I just don't know off the top of my head. It was primarily the jurisdictions, Colorado Springs Utilities, our sanitation districts, and some other stakeholders that are part of that standing committee. But Samantha and I can check and see if they've been involved.
Yeah, I mean, for the Fountain Creek Watershed District, they've done an enormous amount of work in pursuing grant money and doing a lot of Fountain Creek changes in southern El Paso County that deals a lot with the particulates within the creek that head to Pueblo, and the work done there is something on the order of $50 million right now. So there's just an enormous amount of action and activity taking place in some of these districts. So they've got to be key players somehow, some way in what's going on in this plan.
Just for the record, let me point out that Commissioner Vanderwerf and Commissioner Bremer have joined us this morning. Holly?
Additional comments, though. I see here most of the people on the Water Quality Management Committee are, and participated in this, are sanitation districts. And so we do have we have a whole bunch from northern El Paso County, which is my area, but we do have the Fountain Sanitation District. So I'm just kind of wondering if that's where Fountain Creek Watershed participated, is through their sanitation district. So.
Okay, Turner, and then Ken. Turner first.
You mentioned the public health and environment grant. I represent the town of Rama. Tiny town.
Microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. I represent the tiny town of Rama, 130 people. A few years back, the Colorado Department of Health and Environment informed us that we had been found by the Army Corps of Engineers that our current evaporation pond was in a 500-year floodplain, and that we would need to move that evap pond, and that we're given until 2022 to have that moved. So we are in the middle of that. In the beginning, the first estimate on that cost was $1.8 million. That figure has since bounced around between $2.2 million and $2.9 million. Now, this grant that you talked about from the public health and environment, is that just for your program to wrap your thing up, or is that something that we could tap into?
This was a very small grant, about $20,000 or so, to help put this together. But the state does have other programs for that, the revolving fund programs. You'd have to contact their loans and grants.
Yeah, we're reaching out to a lot of people, but anytime I hear about a pot of money, I'm going to ask.
Yes, I understand that. Yeah.
I'm not afraid to pay.
$2 million is a lot for a small town.
Okay, Mayor Dre.
Thank you. I want to just reiterate Commissioner Vanderwerf's comment about the Fountain Creek Watershed District. I had that on my list as well. My particular question concerns Fountain Creek and with regard to E. coli problems. I haven't been able to pull up the full report and read that, whether you identify that, but we are interested in trying to find more information about our sources of E. coli. We do know that there's a significant problem in Fountain Creek, and we're trying to figure out if you all have identified that, and if so, will this plan help us move forward with some solutions?
Funny you should ask that. There was a watershed plan that was recently developed for E. coli for the Fountain Creek watershed. The AFCURE group and lots of stormwater people all got together, a different grant from CDPHE to help write this watershed plan, which is kind of a precursor to a TMDL, a total maximum daily load document. Are we familiar with what that is? So when you have an impaired stream, the state ends up having to write a TMDL identifying all sources of, in this case, E. coli to the watershed and how that may be remediated in an attempt to get the stream back into compliance. So this watershed plan is kind of a first step toward a TMDL that the Water Quality Division will be working on probably starting later in 2020, but I think their plan is to have it written and developed by 2021 so it can start to be implemented. We can very well get you a copy of what that plan is, what it says. When you get into things like E. coli, a lot of times it's non-point sources that are coming in. Anytime it rains, you usually see large increases in E. coli in the stream, as opposed to seeing point source discharges being the main contribution to something like that. And unfortunately, there isn't a ton of data out there to quantify what those non-point sources are bringing in. So this plan that was written and evaluated kind of came with a monitoring plan to try to help identify what some of those non-point sources are, and then there's a list of best management practices that can be implemented in various areas to help reduce E. coli concentrations prior to the division doing the TMDL. But we can get you a copy of that if you're interested.
I am, and I guess I would mention that I did ask our representative to the Fountain Creek Watershed District if she knew about this plan, and she did not. And so we have not had any information. If we can create that kind of connection would be really helpful, I think.
I think we do. In fact, AFCURE, the Arkansas Fountain Coalition for Urban River Evaluation is what this stands for. It's a group of dischargers and stakeholders that come together once a month for the last 5 or 6 years to discuss regulatory issues, to discuss how to improve the watershed. It would be great to get Fountain Creek Watershed Group attached in with AFCURE.
I just really had a comment. I really just wanted to say I really like this update, and I really love the map that you had up on the screen in your first slide. I think it's a really good reminder to all of us that our watersheds mirror our food sheds, and that our water issues know no boundaries, and what happens upstream impacts downstream, and that we all regionally play a role in ensuring our water is protected. And I really appreciate this body working together toward that end, and I really like this plan, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and a lot of the credit goes to Sam Bailey when she came in here.
Sam's
she really
great.
Jumped right on this and took over a lot of aspects of coordinating on this effort, so a lot of congrats to her on getting this together.
Stan?
Yes, thank you. So just kind of a follow-on to this, and in looking at the document, it looks to be very, very comprehensive, which is fantastic. So having a regional approach to it, is really also, I think, critically important. But to this point about whether these other groups, by the way, you do list them. Section 19 has the Fountain Creek Watershed District. Now, I don't have that section in front of me here, but since it's only part of one page, it's probably just a brief description of what the district is and not much more. It seems to me before we, this is going to be my suggestion, before we send this to the state for review and approval, we might want to have these other local agencies that are involved in water and water quality get an opportunity to review this document, because the last thing I think we'd want to do is create this plan, get it up to the state, get it approved by the state, then find ourselves somehow crosswise with one of these local agencies and find ourselves compelling them to do something that they either don't want to do or truly think is not correct thing to do. So this is a recommendation I have. I don't know what the board might feel about this, but there are several listed here. Upper Monument Water Quality Management Association, Mid-Monument, Lower Fountain Water Quality, El Paso County Water Authority, Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority. There's a lot of authorities and districts that probably should have an opportunity to review this document before it goes forward, because if they agree with what's in this, then I'd say this thing is absolutely blessed and is going to be good for the community because everybody's on board with it.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Maybe?
Yeah, we have until next month to make any decision. So I guess the charge to the board is to take this plan back to your districts to make sure that the players all engaged, and we have a meaningful discussion before we vote next month. A couple of questions I've got, like Stan kind of touched on it, was once the document's finished, what weight does it have? Is it directive? Is it suggestive? Is it a conversation? Where is it?
Well, the Pikes Peak Council of Governments would take that document anytime they're reviewing a site approval or a design approval sort of application. So that application, gets developed, it gets sent to the state, it also gets sent to the local Council of Governments to get their approval and their buy-off on it as well before the state gives their final approval. So that's one of the main uses of that document.
So the plan sets the valuation criteria for which future projects may or may not be approved. Is that right?
For wastewater treatment facilities.
For wastewater
They've got to
treatment.
be consistent with the 208 plan.
Okay.
So that it sets the policies and the process for evaluating those site applications, whether it's an expansion of a plant or putting in pump stations or other major infrastructure that feeds into those plants.
So that's the point. It is a compliance document. Is that
Guidance.
Guidance.
Planning,
But yes, it's
yeah.
required. Yeah, I don't know what happens if we get an application that's not in compliance. I guess it doesn't go forward until it's amended and the project is amended. We haven't had that situation, I don't think.
It's worth a discussion. A couple of the points. Would the plan include urban stormwater? Quality of urban stormwater. I'm talking about street treatments. We're talking about mag chloride on roads. All the things that affect urban environments. Are we looking at that stormwater, that runoff as well?
Well, those are things that obviously affect water quality
Right.
throughout an urban area.
Right.
That doesn't tie in so much to a wastewater treatment facility.
No.
Planning, development, expansion, any of that sort of stuff. But it is things to consider when, let's say a stormwater agency is evaluating something themselves, is to take this 208 plan and the water quality goals that are aligned within that plan and hopefully tie the elements of the plan into what they're doing as
I'm
well.
thinking about residue runoff. You have a big development, and you've got silt coming off that development, now going into the stream bed. Is that a factor evaluated by the plan? Maybe, Andy, you've got a comment.
The short answer is yes. That is part of the issue, part of the overall plan that goes into that, and that's part of the lawsuit against Colorado Springs.
Yeah, that's kind of why I brought it up.
And going back over the last several years, this board has approved a number of different plans, projects rather, for various sanitation districts and lift stations and so forth that had to be in concert with the 208 plan. We have, in fact, reviewed those in the past.
Okay. Second general question is, does it affect or watershed protection? In other words, fire mitigation up in the up high country to prevent ash runoff and so on. Is watershed protection a factor?
And it is another element of the plan. The Council of Governments, I don't know how much they get into decisions on that.
We've got a lot of watershed in Telemann Park.
The idea is that you get this developed and it is shared with all these other agencies that are in charge of implementing various aspects of this, and hopefully they are tying into the ideas within the plan as well.
Okay. Well, and I have one more.
Go ahead, you go first.
Thank you. And last is, the EPA just rescinded their rule on the waters of the U.S. That was a long-standing conversation between EPA and engineers. What did that rule change on the waters of the U.S.? Does it affect this plan in terms of the size of federal waterways, the definition of that, and how does it affect the plan?
I don't believe that really affects this plan at all, because
Okay.
Colorado has its own sort of regulatory system about that, and
Okay.
Colorado's system incorporates a lot of basically all of those, and incorporates little drainages that are dry,
Right.
99% of the time. So,
Right.
so Colorado brings in all those other streams and tiny tributaries that the U.S. plan wouldn't have defined as a water.
Okay. Holly?
Okay, this question is more following up on what Trustee Smith said and some of the things I'm learning on water. And I'm just wondering, with the consideration of Proposition DD, this is actually towards Andy, and some different funding sources opening up, and then those of us who maybe don't quite understand all of the plan we're voting on here next year, because we weren't here in 2010 when we passed it recently. Would there be an interest in like a Water 101 morning where we just said, okay, these are different places we can find funding. If Proposition DD passes, this is where we want to be going, and this is a PowerPoint by PowerPoint presentation of each chapter of this. And that gives, and I don't know if there would be an interest for people to come to that. I would probably be interested, so.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And maybe we set up perhaps a separate work session, and maybe it's with the Water Quality Management Committee, because one of the things we'd like to do, once we get this adopted, approved by the state, is kind of our next step, is do some community regional education around what the plan means. And yes, it is sort of a regulatory document, but I think it's also to connect with other constituencies that deal with water quality issues and get out there. Sam and I talked about with our next grant with CDPHE, use this to kind of build some public awareness around what's in the plan, what the policies say, and how the plan is used and so forth. So maybe that's a good way to kick off that effort. I like the suggestion.
Well, and I know with Proposition DD potentially passing, I think that our region wants to be first out the gate on how to
Okay.
get those grants and the funding for
That
projects.
is just before our next month meeting as well, that
Okay.
vote will be taken, November
Yeah.
6th. So, are you thinking we would have this workshop before or after the next board meeting, Holly?
Before.
Before. So sometime in the next 4 weeks to do this. Okay.
No, I only say that, I mean, we don't have to have it until after either. I
Oh.
can read the plan on my own. So, or we can meet for an hour and say, okay, Holly, this is what you need to know. Okay. And do a more in-depth workshop after the election.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, a bunch of them. Andy, and then Turner, and then Dick, please.
Well, just a note of caution on having a Water 101. My colleagues on the Colorado Springs Council can probably attest to the fact that that will hurt your head very much. And water law and all of the different issues that have come into that, that's not even a day. Okay, that's a day to introduce what the topics will be. It is extraordinarily complex, and what Proposition DD is going to do is, and pardon the expression, is a drop in the bucket of what kind of money comes in down there. But that money would essentially assist certain people to do something. But the overall Colorado Water Plan, for example, is a multi-billion-dollar dream, which is, for the most part, well, it's not a dream. I mean, it's a pretty good plan, but it's up to the responsibilities of local water districts to fund their own projects. What that state money would do is give and assist a little boost for those people who have trouble getting over the hump, such as the aforementioned issue over there. So, but it's not a big pot of money. I mean, we had the discussion yesterday. It's minuscule compared to what the overall. It's not going to fund our water projects.
Okay, Attorney Smith, and then Commissioner Elsner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By contrast to water, transportation may be simpler, but I know with the RTA, for example, I feel like people support what they understand. And so I think the idea of helping them to understand it is a good one. And it may be a tougher lift than what you first think, but Andy's grinning from ear to ear. But I think it has merit. Thank you.
Okay, Dick.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about Proposition DD shortly. We had a conversation at the South Platte Basin Water Roundtable last night where we were talking about some of the projects, and DD is a really nice, that's a good way to go, and any money that can be brought in, their understanding is that is going to go mostly towards large water projects, not individual, and trying to get them started. The biggest issue we have in Colorado is storage, and you know that's instead of the buy and dry process that has been going on in the Eastern Plains and up in the mountains, they're looking at trying to create storage, which is the goal for the long term. So I think when you start talking about DD providing a large pot of money that you can use, I think that's going to evaporate pretty quickly based on all of the needs that have been identified in the water plan.
Yes. Any other comments, questions? Obviously, a big topic. Thanks for all the work that's brought to the point here. We've got 30 days now for consideration, so this will be back before the board for decision, for consideration for adoption at the November meeting. Andy, any closing comments?
Yeah, we have a lot of outreach to do, obviously, with the Fountain Creek group and other folks that are referenced in the plan, so we'll certainly do that, and with the CAC as well, and then bring back, hopefully we should be ready by November for a final decision by the board. And we'll probably work with Andrew and the folks at Brown and Caldwell as well as we kind of figure out what a work session education outreach program might look like.
Okay. And then Stan?
And I just would like to express my thanks that we had an quick information session on this plan now to give the board an opportunity to give you some feedback before we have to come to a vote on it, because that'll give the team an opportunity to work some of those comments so that when we get to the vote, it'll most likely be successful. Thanks.
Now, in the event that there is additional comments and discussion, can we slip the timeline, or is there somebody else waiting for this downstream? To use another pun.
Upstream, actually.
Upstream.
CDPHE would like it, and I think we're aiming for a spring commission approval date, and they need it about 90 days.
Is it a May hearing that I think we're scheduled for?
I think it was May. So if we got it to them maybe by December, that might still be okay, although they needed, I think, 90 to 120 days to review it and provide comments back.
Yeah, so the division wants to review it and provide edits, and then we'll have to go and address those before we can officially submit it to the commission to get it on what's an administrative action hearing, get it on their document 90 days in advance.
What I'm hearing, if we have to slip the decision for discussion in November and a final decision in December, is that okay? Is that acceptable to CDPHE?
We will check and see. We'll contact them this week and find out what's their drop-dead date.
Okay.
And we'll make it work either way. If we've got to come back by November, we'll make it happen. If we've got a little more time.
I just want to make sure, obviously this is an important topic for nearly everybody around the table. I want to make sure that we're getting good, and I would urge jurisdictions to contact Andy or staff, between meetings. Give them some, if you have specific questions, if issues, bring them up to staff midpoint so that we can actually have something meaningful in November for discussion, maybe reach a conclusion based on good staff research before November meeting as well. So,
we do have good staff at El Paso County, so maybe we'll have them look over it too.
Yeah, of course.
So they can just advise us.
Yeah. Okay. Busy month ahead, Sam.
I just saw some gray hair coming in on Samantha's head.
Okay. Any other discussion on the 208 plan? All right. Move on to item 5B, 2019 ozone season update. And
Samantha, I think, is going to come up and introduce our speakers from CDPHE on air quality. It seems like the first half of our meeting is all about our environmental programs. We wanted to give a brief update on how we fared through this past ozone season, and really pleased to have the folks, the experts from CDPHE, to come down and give us some information as far as how we fared.
That was a good intro, Andy. Thanks. So the Air Quality Technical Committee has been meeting regularly to discuss air quality trends from the two monitors in relation to ozone here in Colorado Springs and in Manitou. So I invited CDPHE, who are the owners of the data, to provide kind of a summer overview of the ozone data and what the next steps are and future projects for the Air Quality Technical Committee. So this is Gordon Pierce from CDPHE.
Welcome.
Thank you. So as Sam mentioned, I wanted to give an overview of ozone, what's been going on so far this year down in Colorado Springs. And so I'll start out with just a quick 101 as far as ozone. I just don't know the familiarity of the board here. So ozone is one of 6 what EPA calls criteria pollutants. Those are pollutants for which they have set national ambient air quality standards. There's currently 2 standards in effect for ozone. One dates back to 2008, and that's 75 parts per billion. And then the most current one is a 2015 standard of 70 parts per billion. Typically, they revoke the old standard, but it got tied up in litigation, still is, so both standards are technically in effect. They're both defined as the 3-year average of the daily fourth maximum 8-hour values. So it's nice and easy to define and to describe.
So essentially, you take you've got essentially 365 fourth maximum 365 8-hour maximum values in the year. You take the fourth max value, 3 subsequent years, and average those together. If it's at 70 or below, you're in attainment. If it's 71 or higher, you're in non-attainment. And they do it as a truncation, so 70.999 truncates actually to 70. So that's still in attainment, just the way they've defined it. Health effects, ozone is an irritant, looking at airway, lung function. So asthmatics in particular and kids are susceptible to higher ozone concentrations. Those that are very active outdoors are going to feel the effects of ozone, higher ozone as well. Ozone is a little different in that it's not what we call a primary pollutant. It's not directly emitted from sources. It's what we call a secondary pollutant. It's a reaction product from other pollutants. So you really need VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and oxides of nitrogen, or NOx, reacting together in sunlight to form ozone. There are some other processes that can go on. You'll smell ozone with lightning, for instance. But typically, this is the main process by which it's formed in the lower atmosphere. Obviously, we like ozone up in the stratosphere. It protects us from UV radiation, but down here at ground level is where it's a problem. It's a health concern. So with needing sunlight, we get the highest concentrations in the summer. So for VOCs and NOx, we're looking at mainly as combustion sources, motor vehicles, industry, oil and gas production. And then another big source is, especially for VOCs, is biogenics, vegetation. So if you ever go up and smell a pine tree, you can smell that, the odor that you get off it, the pinene, isoprenes, things like that. For the Colorado Springs area, or the El Paso County area, looking at the VOC emission inventory. So I've pulled up, these are data from the 2014 National Emission Inventory, which is the most recent version that the EPA really has. The 2017 NEI is just coming out. They have it out for point sources, but not for other sources yet. So as you can see, in the biggest portion of the pie here is the biogenic sources. So it's actually your biggest source of VOCs. And that's followed by vehicles in the blue, and then solvent usage in the other processing in the kind of greenish there. And just on the right side, and I won't go into that, you can look at it later, is just a breakdown by county for the whole area, the PPACG area. For NOx, a little different. Highway vehicles are by far the biggest source, and that's then followed by EGU's electrical generating units. So obviously the two biggest ones that are going to be in the area are going to be the Drake Power Plant and Nixon Power Plants. There are other smaller EGUs that do go into this as well. And then that's followed by off-highway vehicles, so construction equipment, things like that. Water monitoring requirements. So EPA has a whole set of standards for what's required for monitoring for the different pollutants. So for the Colorado Springs metropolitan statistical area, looking at population, getting up towards 750,000 people. So based on that, it falls between their 350 and 4 million size range. So you have a choice of 2 sites or 1 site. In this case, we're above 85% of the NACs for the 3-year average. So we need 2 sites for this area. EPA used to have a monitoring season that was a little more focused on the summer. They've expanded it now to where we have to monitor year-round. So where are the sites? As you can see, we've had some old sites. We had one one down by Security, one that's the old Tejon site on the south side of downtown Colorado Springs, and what we call our Chestnut site off Garden of the Gods Road. The 2 current sites are Manitou Springs
which started back in 2004, and the Air Force Academy, which on the south side of the Air Force Academy, which started back in 1996. So we have a fairly long trend of data for the area. Here's the two sites. These are all kind of the sites that we look at in Colorado. Not all of these are ours, but these are all the ones that we look at as being of a good quality data to see if the areas are in attainment. So Colorado Springs, circled here, both those are blue. We're below the standard. You can see the current non-attainment area outlined in purple. That's the only non-attainment area that we have in the state for any pollutant, the North Front Range of Colorado for ozone. And you can see that most of the sites that are in non-attainment are in that area. Specifically looking at Colorado Springs, these are the fourth max values for the last 3 years for both sites. So this year was actually quite a bit lower than last year. So that's a really good thing. A lot of it is probably meteorological driven. We do see quite a bit of variation from year to year. But the fact that it's lower is great. So our 3-year average, which was 70 last year, has now dropped a little bit. So we're actually looking a little better now. To actually exceed next year, we'd have to have these types of values at the two sites. So that's higher than what we saw last year, which was a bad year for ozone. If you look at, these are what the 5 highest values are for each of the sites and the dates on which they occurred. And you can see they're all in the summer time period, which is what we would expect for this area and what we see in the Front Range in general. Looking at some of the other areas of Colorado, just as a comparison, you can see in the Front Range, the North Front Range of Colorado, that's where we have all of our problems in our non-attainment area. And you can see we actually have 3 sites that are above the old 75 part per billion standard as well in the North Front Range. So Colorado Springs is considerably better than that. If we look at the rest of Colorado, more the western slope of Colorado, where all of the other sites are, Colorado Springs is kind of right in the mix for those. If you look at the 3-year average, it's slightly higher maybe than these, but not much. And this kind of goes to what you can see is ozone is much more of a regional pollutant. There's a lot of what we call background ozone, either coming in from out of state or from natural emissions. So I mean, even when you look at EPA's Gothic site, which is north of Mount Crested Butte, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, isn't any major town for tens of miles.
67.
They're still getting fairly high levels of ozone. So that's part of why it's a problem. The whole western U.S., this is a problem where we see some high background levels. And the question is, what do you do with that? It's not something that we have any control over. Looking at the trend graph, you can see these are the 3-year averages, and this is where the standard was for quite a while, the old 97 standard. And then in 2008, it dropped down to the 80 or 75 parts per billion, and then down in 2015 to 70 parts per billion. As you can see, especially on the right-hand side, when we're just looking from year to year, a lot of annual variation, as I said, a lot of it driven by meteorology. But as you can see overall, there is a little bit of a downward trend. We'd like to see it quicker, but it is at least a downward trend. So at this point, we are very hopeful that Colorado Springs is going to stay in the clear. It certainly is at the moment, and so we're not anticipating that we will go into non-attainment in this area at any point. We do look at exceptional events as well. These are events over which we have no control. Primarily for ozone, we're looking at stratospheric intrusions, where in certain meteorological conditions, especially in the spring, some storms can bring stratospheric ozone down to the surface. The other is that wildfire smoke, especially when it's from long distance, that can go towards increasing ozone a bit. Last year we had a number of wildfire events. This year really didn't have any, and we're actually only looking at one possible sort of event that would have impacted this area, and that was a stratospheric intrusion event. That was actually, June 6th was the highest day that we had for ozone in this area. If EPA allows us to document these, and if we submit documentation, if they approve it, then we can get that data, those data excluded from consideration. In this case, since Colorado Springs is below the level of the NAAQS, EPA won't even bother looking at it. Also, if we excluded that event, the fifth max values are the same as the fourth max values, so there'd be no change in the 3-year average anyway. So we won't do anything with it, but it's nice to see there's very few events this year. So just for summary, the area is in attainment, and the trend is downward. So good news with Colorado Springs area for El Paso County. We are still going to be looking, we're required to continue monitoring at 2 sites in the area. We are looking still at a replacement location for our current Air Force Academy site, just because of access issues there. It's kind of blocked off at the moment, so it's getting equipment back in and out is difficult. EPA has started the next round of reviews for the ozone standard. They're expected to make final decisions on whether there'll be any changes to the standard by the end of next year. At this point, it's hard to say what will happen. All of our data can find at this website. We upload all of our data on an hourly basis. And then we also upload it to EPA's National Air Quality System. So this is another location. This is a good location to look if you're looking just for the annual trends, looking what you get on the annual summaries. One of the other things we do is we do have Ozone Action Day alerts. So we do forecasting every day of the year for not only ozone but all the other pollutants as needed, and for any air quality event such as wildfires that come up. We issue an alert every day, give or take around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and health messaging is the primary focus. Disseminated through a number of means, and our target audience has typically been for the Denver Metro North Front Range ozone attainment area, non-attainment area, but it does also include the Colorado Springs area as well. So if you look on the right-hand slide, we had quite a fewer Ozone Action Day alerts that were issued this year, only 32 in comparison to 52 last year. So ozone was down across the board, so that was good news. We do have a voluntary emissions reductions program as well. We try and forecast 2 to 3 days in advance what ozone is likely to be, and emails are sent out specifically sort of to industry to see if they can change their operations to try and reduce either VOC or NOx emissions. We think it's had some effect. It's hard to define just how much because we just don't get much information back from companies. But it's something that we are going to continue doing because we do think it probably is having some effect. And then finally, if you're interested in signing up for air quality alerts, the couple of options. One is EnviroFlash, which is a national system, or through our own systems. We have 3 different emails for different types of alerts that go out. And you can go onto that website that's listed there and get signed up for one of those if you're interested. We also put on our forecast page, which we update at least once a day. We have some different forecast areas. Colorado Springs is the second one here. This day, whatever it was good for everything there. But it covers the different pollutants as well. So there is CO monitoring, sulfur dioxide monitoring, and particulate monitoring down here in the Springs as well. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Question from Mr. Pierce. On the table, Andy?
Yeah, a couple questions. One on the Air Force Academy, where is that site that you're having trouble getting access to?
It's just north of the new sort of visitor center check-in area. off Academy Boulevard, just on the south side of Kettle Lakes. It's by the old shooting range.
Oh, okay.
There.
The old shooting range. Okay. I was with you until you said that.
Okay.
So, maybe we can ask the Air Force Academy rep to see if we can sort out the access so you don't have to move it.
Yeah, I was going to offer, Mr. Pierce, if you'd like to chat about that after, I'm happy to have a discussion about whatever access issues you're having and see if we can work it out.
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, that would be point one. Point two, could you go back to the part where you had the chart and you showed Colorado Springs and the daily events and so forth?
This one here?
Yes. So you have Colorado Springs, the 2017-2019 average is 69. You had 2019 through September is 65. Mm-hmm. Your events are your key event dates show below those numbers. So how do you have the peak days below your average?
Okay, so for 2019, this year, these are the fourth max values, which are these two values here. These are the top 5 values from this year.
Okay, are those? I thought I understood you to say that those were the peak days that you had were the events.
We had one, what we could consider an exceptional event for stratospheric ozone. Is that what you mean, or?
No, I thought you said you had like 4 or 5 of your peak days you showed, but the peak days were all below your annual average, and I'm trying to decipher how mathematically you get there. Or maybe I misunderstood the chart.
Maybe you misunderstood. So these up here are the fourth max values.
Oh, those are not the average, those are the fourth max.
Yeah, these are
Okay,
max.
okay, now I'm starting to track a little bit better. All right.
Okay.
And there was one other comment I wanted to make. At the stack, we had the Weld County Commissioner, Commissioner Kirkmeyer, talked about their inventory because they're well out of attainment. So they did an evaluation, and we're all looking at Weld County because they're pumping out all this stuff because of oil and gas development. And they measured them as 2.5 parts per million was because of oil and gas. 5 parts per million was China. So and I'm kind of trying to compare those numbers back to here and going, if you take China out of the equation and Weld County out of the equation, and how much of that is coming down here and affecting these numbers. I realize that you haven't done that level of stuff, and I've asked Commissioner Kirkmeyer to send me that report, which she hasn't done yet. But so I'm just going off of what she said. But it seems like there's a huge disconnect in about how much of this is anything that we have any control over. And it looks to me, as you put the chart up there, that we have control of about 1/3 of what is up there. Is that roughly?
That's probably about right, yes.
That's about right, okay.
Yeah, for background ozone, typically we look at, on a high ozone day, so when we're getting up to, say, 70 parts per billion, we're looking at anywhere from 40 up to 60 parts per billion is what we could consider background, either from natural sources, reactions from natural sources, or coming in from out of state, including international. Different reports are out there, but you'll see anywhere from 2 to 6 parts per billion is coming in from international sources, China being one of the main ones. So yes, how we deal with that, EPA doesn't really address that. That's part of the problem at the moment. There's no good way to address that. When you look at it on face value as far as public health protection, doesn't really matter where ozone's coming from. It's still a public health concern. How we deal with it.
How you deal with it and how you count it, and how you penalize the local community for something that is happening in China is kind of where I'm sort of going, well, there's not much we can do about that.
You're correct.
I suppose we could declare him an illegal immigrant. But,
no, you're correct. That is very much an issue that is out there, yeah.
Okay. And my final request is that you send us this, because this brief is really nice, but it was not in our packet and has a lot of really good information.
Yeah,
and
I
I can appreciate Yolanda's problems here, because I'm having a hard time reading the font off of that. so I'd like to be able to actually read it.
Right, and I apologize for getting it down here later, but the council does have it, so they can distribute that.
Appreciate it, thank you.
And I will just point out the fourth max of Colorado Springs, 69. It's the same fourth max as what's in the wilderness of southwest Colorado, 69.
Yes.
All right, Ken?
With no power plant.
Quick question, just see if I understand this. There were 32 alert days. Is an alert day when we're over 70?
An alert day is when we anticipate we're going to have high ozone. And so certainly we look, more of that focus, it includes Colorado Springs area, but more of our focus is on the North Front Range where we do tend to get a little higher levels. So it is days when we're looking that we could go over 70 parts per billion up in the North Front Range.
But that's basically your threshold that you're using is 70. So 32 days in the season, which we're assuming is the summer, 90 days-ish or so. So one-third of that time for 2019, you issued alerts for those days?
For the summer, yes.
For the summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually had, I think it was either 19 or 20 days that went over 70 parts per billion in the North Front Range area.
Right.
And zero down here.
So while I appreciate Councilmember Pico's statement that maybe some of this is coming from China, for those people that have health concerns related to ozone, that doesn't really help them much.
Correct.
And so getting that information out is really great, and I appreciate your doing that. Obviously, we as a community can only do so much. We as a state can only do so much. We as a region, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the health issue is the health issue. And so to me, that's a pretty critical number. How many days were people impacted by ozone? And in this case, it seems like quite a bit. And if you're someone that is impacted by that, it's probably not very good for you. So as much as we can do to, change that, I think would be great. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
Sure. Andy?
Quick follow-on. You said you issue the ozone alerts when the North Front Range is going to have an ozone day? Does that include us? You're alerting us when North Front Range?
We look at the meteorology along the Front Range is quite similar between the Denver North Front Range and Colorado Springs. We tend to see the higher ozone levels, and if we look at this site, you can see most of the high sites are all along the foothills.
Yeah. My question is, when you're issuing the alert that we receive in Colorado Springs, and we start doing things like restricting our generation and travel and asking people, but you're issuing the alert because of the North Front Range, not because of Colorado Springs. If I understood what you said.
We look at both areas. We do look at both areas independently, but we sort of combine them for a lot of the alerts because of the similar meteorological conditions, if that makes sense. So if it's going to be high in one area, it's likely going to be high in the other area as well.
Okay, but you're issuing an alert for Colorado Springs because Denver is going to go above.
In a way, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments?
Just one more.
Holly?
Tongue-in-cheek, for real, you've never been a weatherman in Colorado Springs. You only have to be right 50% of the time down here.
All right, Stan, and then we'll move on.
Yes, thank you. So to follow Councilmember Pico's comments, you've mentioned this concept that it's similar meteorological conditions across the Front Range. But then on the other side of the coin, we seem to have consistently different outputs with lower numbers in Colorado Springs. So when you issue the alert as a result of something in Denver or northern Colorado, we might actually behave differently as a result of that alert and actually not really need to do that because we're not exceeding the standard, and there's a cost associated with that process. So I just wonder if there's something that can be done about bifurcating these two regions, even if it might be similar meteorologically, just maybe separate them and pay attention to that a little bit more or something, because there's a cost associated with that alert when we try to, something that CSU can do about maybe running a little bit less on certain types of machines that produce these ozone.
From the alerts themselves, I don't think there's really a cost associated with that because that alert is put out that day.
Right, no, but it's the
so-
response of the community to the alert that is potentially the cost.
Correct. I guess so. Some people could elect not to do certain things based on their own health, yes. The voluntary forecasting is where we would look more towards changes that industry would make.
Okay, Andy and then Sharon, then we're going to have to wrap up this topic.
What Commissioner Vanderwerf said is exactly the point, and what I'm trying to drive at. Colorado Springs Utilities does restrict generation of the coal-fired units and shifts to natural gas to the extent possible, which on a hot day, not necessarily, maybe not, but not at all, but we do that. There is a cost associated with that. So if you're issuing alerts here because of what Denver is doing, you are costing us. And I would ask that you tailor your alerts to the regions. If you're telling us we're going to have a high ozone day and it's only 65, while Denver is 75, you are causing us a cost. And I'd ask you to take a look at that.
Fair enough. Once again, the alerts are just issued that day, rather than in advance, which is the voluntary emissions reductions program. So, but it. Okay. Fair enough. We can certainly look at that. Yeah.
Okay, Sharon.
I would like to concur with the comments that Stan has made and Andy, because I know I moved from an area where we did have a high ozone level, and the schools would change for the day. They wouldn't let the kids out for recess. They wouldn't do PE outside. And so there is a cost and stress associated with that, to change your plans last minute. So I concur with them. If it's not truly for our area, it needs to not be issued for our area. We wouldn't issue a flood alert for a flood up in Denver down here and expect people. We wouldn't issue a fire warning for anything, for a fire up in the northern state for us to take precautions down here. So I think people are very serious about their health when it comes to ozone, and I really wish you would reconsider looking at that.
Okay, we'll do.
Great. Well, thank you for your presentation. We'll look for the distribution of the slides here, probably by email.
Yeah, we'll send that out this afternoon. Yeah, thank you much, Gordon. Got those. Thank you. CDPHE has been really super to work with. Dana Wojtek's here as well. If you'll remember last year when we had a briefing just internal with staff on ozone, we thought we were going to end up in non-attainment because we had a really bad year last year, so we kind of mobilized, got our technical committee back together, engaged a lot with CDPHE, and they've been really, really helpful and did a lot of community outreach and engagement. Even though we can affect about just a third of the emissions, I think maybe every little bit helped, and the weather certainly cooperated, so appreciate the full response to getting the word out. Okay.
Okay. Item 7C, process for selecting 2020 officers. These folks right here.
Good morning, board members. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. So Norm had brought up, and so had Andy and I, that it was time for everybody to know how this officer process was going to work.
I like my job, but there's a next step. All right. Go ahead.
In October, our executive director sends out an email to all of the board members saying, are you interested, and what are you interested in serving as? It gives each of you an opportunity to say that you're interested in only serving as chair, but nothing else, or interested in serving as nothing, or interested in any position. It gives you the chance to give us your feedback and your requests. That also gives us the ability to find out who should be on the nominating committee. Obviously, someone who wants to run should not be on the nominating committee to review their own application. That nominating committee is selected in November by the chair from board members who are not interested in serving. At the December board meeting, the nominating committee selects the nominations for each board officer, is presented the nominations for each of the board officer positions, and then the nominating committee meets to consider those applications. There are a few small things that are required within that, and then at the January meeting, the nominating committee presents the slate of officers as they propose, and the board of directors votes upon it. Does anyone have any questions about how the process works?
Okay. So then there'll be an email going out following this meeting asking for your interest either in holding a position, all positions, or no position. Ken?
Having served on the nominating committee last time, what I would ask is to perhaps send out, there were some guidelines or something in our bylaws, I think, that influenced that unfortunately I was not aware of, so maybe we could distribute that to whoever's going to serve on the nominating committee, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I would say that those comments are largely contained in this week's packet.
Yeah.
So please consider that, correct. Any other comments? All right, we depend on your service. Please consider serving. Okay, our next step then is evaluation of the executive director, Barb Watson. HR.
Good morning, Barb Watson, PPACG HR Manager. I'd like to go over a couple of things with the process of the evaluation process for the executive director. We'll be starting that this month. I had the evaluation form in the board packet. So it's right here. It's in your board packet, so you can complete that and send it to me. After this board meeting, I'm going to also send out an electronic version that you could return to me as well. So either way, and if you have any questions, please contact me. I would like them returned no later than October 31st. So at the November board meeting, we will be voting to go into closed executive session to review the 2019 performance and then set 2020 goals. So that will be at 8:30 so that we can convene and then go into the regular board meeting at 9 o'clock. There was a 360-degree evaluation done this summer with the staff. 33 evaluation surveys were sent out and 27 were returned, which is an 82% response rate, which is really excellent. And I just wanted to stress that the evaluation is really important, so you're filling out the form and you're giving your input would be really appreciated. So if I could have those again by October 31st, that would be great.
It's Halloween.
It's Halloween.
Well, yeah. Happy Halloween.
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, thank you. Barb, was there an expectation from the executive director to do a self-evaluation also, and can we see that?
The self-evaluation was done with the 360. Are you talking about a self-evaluation on this form?
No, with the 360, so we can see that.
Yes. You should have seen that in the results that was done with the 360, and that was in the summary packet.
Okay. Thank you.
If you'd like to see it again, I could meet with you sometime.
Yeah. Just a reminder, the 360 evaluation was done, but a decision was made not to reveal the results of that 360. We didn't want to provide, there's a lot of evidence whether or not the 360 evaluation provides negatively influence the entire board for something that's done independent of the board's assessment. So that evaluation 360 is available, but our decision by consensus of this board by vote was to make that the executive board reviewed that 360 results, determined there was nothing of significant concern, no red flags, but had there been, then we would have released that to the full board. But there was nothing in the 360 that caused any concern for the executive board, and therefore it was not included, released to the entire board for, we thought would provide some undue influence on the board by members' staff.
And the chair and the first vice chair did meet with the executive director to go over the results, and discuss any questions or anything. So that was a good process.
It was a mentoring tool rather than as an evaluation tool. Was a decision. So, okay.
Any questions?
Other comments, questions?
Did you say we're meeting at 8 on in the
8:30. So please make that memo.
I'm sorry, what time?
8:30. 0830, right? 30 minutes before our regular meeting. This board will vote to whether to go into executive session. We'll meet 30 minutes. We'll review the results of your comments with Mr. Gunning. Then hopefully we'll be done by 9 a.m. and everybody else can join us at 9. That's the plan. That's on the 13th of November. Correct. So please set your calendar for 8:30 a.m. for board members.
And Norm, I'd just suggest that that's included in the packet because some will forget.
Yes. And we've talked about some additional alerts.
No.
We'll put some alerts out there, email reminders for 8:30 next month for the full board, voting members of the board. Our military partners need not attend. Thank you. Join us at 9.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Okay, we're on to action items. Item 6A, 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan. Heavy lift. Catherine?
Good morning, Catherine Wenger, Senior Transportation Planner, PPACG. So over the past few months, you've heard me come up and talk about our long-range plan and getting it ready to release to the public. So we're finally there, and so this month we're bringing an action item to release our draft document to the general public for comments on our plan, on the draft plan. So we've provided opportunity, and we've released the document in 3 drafts to all of our boards for comments. We did receive some comments and made updates based on those. A lot of those were kind of grammatical ones, so we appreciate all the help we got. And then so we brought those back to you with the comments that we did receive and the adjustments we made. And so this is the final request before we release it to the public for their comments as well. And then we'll have a 30-day public comment period. And once we get those comments back, we'll bring them back to you again for review, for 30 days for your review, and then in January for the final plan adoption planned.
So just a reminder, the long-range plan is it goes out to 2045, obviously, but no project can be acted upon or constructed unless it's in the long-range plan first. So it's important to embrace corridors and projects. Then, of course, it moves into the 10-year plan, then finally into our TIP, which is the execution portion of the long-range plan. So this is an important document. Questions for Catherine on the long-range transportation plan? This is a major project, a major product of the MPO. This is a statutory obligation. So any discussion, we have a proposed motion to approve the 2045 draft long-range transportation plan for public release and comment. We have a proposed motion. Would you like to make that motion, or Andy?
I move we approval of the motion to release this for public comment.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you, Catherine.
Just a quick reminder, we will be holding 2 public open houses, one at PPACG and one at Sand Creek Library, and I can put the flyer in the back for anyone that wants to see.
Our next item 6B, prioritization of roadway and transit projects. Rob, are you going to take that one, or who's got
I'll
it? Catherine?
introduce it, and we have a
Catherine.
couple people that
Go
are
ahead,
going to
Catherine.
help me out.
It's all yours, Catherine.
Thanks. All right. So last year we had a request from CDOT, and I think the year before as well, to prioritize transit and roadway development programs for the region. And these lists are created to provide CDOT headquarters the area prioritization of projects either for transit or roadway development program. And so I'm going to hand this over to Tim Kirby with CDOT headquarters to give you a little more background on why we're doing these updates.
Okay. Good. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with your permission, before I dive into the details of the new funding available, with Executive Director Evaluations on the tip of my tongue, just a quick shout out to Andy and John. I have the privilege in my role to work with all the MPOs across the state, and I can tell you got 2 of the best in the business right here working with you. So head nod to you guys. Shameless plug, yeah. And guys, just remember, you can make those checks payable to me personally, not the department. So really, here today, I want to take you through 3 things. So we have new funding available. I want to take you through those sources, bring you up to date on conversations that we've had with the Transportation Commission, and then share with you the future schedule. So really, when we talk about new funding, we're talking about 3 separate sources. So back in 2017, the state legislature approved Senate Bill 267. That was followed in 2018 by Senate Bill 1. And then most recently in the 19 session, we saw 262 pass. So really what we're talking about is 3 potential years of funding starting in FY20 going through 22. So what do we know? We know for sure that in 20 we're going to get about $665 million. Now, those next 2 years... Statewide, that's correct. Yeah, sorry, good caveat there. Wouldn't that be nice, right?
Yeah.
So statewide, thank you for the correction. And then in 21 and 22, in each one of those years, it's slated for an additional $500 million per year, so that comes out to $1 billion. Now, the state legislature can always choose to take those dollars back, so we view them as quasi-illustrative. Now, as we were working through the Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee stack, as well as the TC, one of the questions that we had was, should we just focus on that first year, FY20, that we know to be true, Or should we also look at FY '21 and '22? I was joking with John earlier about how his aphorisms tend to be fairly incisive and have permeated the CDOT lexicon. The question was, or I think the aphorism was, if you have a pig and you give it a name, it's a pet. And if you don't give it a name, it's bacon. So that was our question. Should we give it a name, or should we view it as bacon? And as a department, we're going to give it a name. So really what we're looking to do is identify projects for the full potential, right? So instead of just that $665 million, we want to develop a project list for the $1.665 billion, and remember, about $150 million of that is for transit. And I'll get into how we're going to have the transit conversation a little bit later when I talk about the schedule. So that's really the total funding package. Let's talk about the discussions we've had with our Transportation Commission. So we as staff went to the Transportation Commission and said, we want to bring you the list that you want to see. Help us understand what that should look like. So before we get into what the Commission told me, a couple of key pieces of information for you guys to consider. As most of you know, at the state level, we're engaged in the development of our 2045 statewide plan. Really have seen a historic level of an engagement. And what we heard pretty consistently around the state was that in the rural areas, huge emphasis on road condition and safety, whereas in the urban areas we're seeing a lot of demand for travel options and congestion. That information that we've gathered from the public as part of the statewide plan was coincidentally confirmed through data by the recent release of the Reason Foundation report, which is just, think of, a ranking of the states on how we fall across a number of different metrics, most notably of those urban congestion and then rural pavement condition. So that data actually supported exactly what we were hearing from the public. So those two things were in line. So back to the discussion we had with the Commission. Sharing that information, allowing them to discuss amongst themselves. They said, of that 100% pot, focus 75% to kind of urban, rural, interstate, and a mix of capital projects. The other 25%, they told us, focus on rural pavement condition, right? So you can see how kind of those efforts were informing their decision making. And of that entire 100% pot, both the 75 and the 25, a minimum of 50% of those funds has to be directed towards asset management. So really focusing on the condition of our assets. So that was the direction that we got from the TC.
Make a comment. The rural roads did not include interstates.
That's correct.
That carve-out was a very significant piece that I-76 is not a rural road. It's a state asset.
Yeah. Very good, very good. So those were the parameters. And so how does this fit in the context of the conversation that Catherine is having with you all is that, as an MPO, one of the best things you can be doing is exactly what you're doing here today, which is to clearly express your priorities as an MPO, so then CDOT staff can take that and hand it off to the Commission for their consideration. So that's kind of that second piece. The third piece is the schedule. How are we going to move on from here today? So it's our intention for the highway portion of those dollars to take that conversation to Commission this month, walk them through what we've come up with, get their feedback, get their guidance, get their direction, and revise as necessary, with the hope that in November we can ultimately adopt a project list. Why do we want to adopt a project list in November? Well, it's strategically important because the state legislature has given us these dollars. We know that there's a lot of priorities statewide, and we want to signal back to the state legislature we've got a good plan for these dollars and we can put them to use quickly. So that's the plan for the highway side. Transit, on a very similar path. It's just 1 month behind. We didn't want to overwhelm, so you'll be seeing that transit conversation following the same path, but initiated with the Transportation Commission at their November meeting. So with that, I'll stop. Give it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Let me just kind of the move towards really listening to MPOs and the stack being a key player in decision making by the TC is a major shift in the last couple of years. I really have to thank Rocky, for others, for really setting the tone for saying we need to hear from rural areas, MPOs and TPRs around the state. The problem with that, the challenge is that you now need to be prepared to give a good answer. You've got to do the work, the legwork, to know what recommendation to make. That is hard work. And it's really engaged Andy and John and Catherine, because now you have to know what you're talking about when you make a recommendation. You can't just say, well, they'll do whatever they want. They don't. They will listen to you, and you have to have an informed recommendation. That's hard work, and I really want to thank Andy and John, and all around the state, people have really stepped up to this challenge. Andy?
Yeah, just to add to those comments, the staff could not come up with a coherent recommendation because the representation from across the state, of course, it looks very different, where you have both rural and city. And so it's challenging. When you say it's hard to come up with that, good luck, Rocky, because there's no good answer. So you come up with one recommendation and half the room is against it. You come up with the other and the other half's against it. And it gets pretty heated.
So question, discussion, around the table. Sharon?
Are these numbers set in stone, or can they be moved around as different things happen? Because just going off the ozone discussion we were just having, I'm looking at replacement for electric vehicles is way down here. Is that something that you would consider moving up so we stay in ozone attainment? Or perhaps the Manitou Springs project, move it up to their parking and their shuttle project because it would get less cars just sitting there idling during the summer and different events that you guys have. I just don't know how set in stone some of these things are.
Sure. And it sounds like you're looking at our transit development list, by the sounds of it, which is fine. That's also what we're looking at. So there are 4 lists in your agenda. There's a transit one that was developed and approved last year. There's the updated proposed transit list, and those are your first 2 really longer documents. There's also the roadway development program, that's attachment 3, and that's the one that was approved last year by the board. And then finally, the 4th attachment is the new proposed roadway development list proposed for approval this year. And so we wanted to make sure you had all those lists, because if a new one isn't approved, then the old ones stand as they were approved last year. So that's what those are for. And to your question, yes, you can. That's why we're bringing these to you, is that you can suggest that these get moved. The transit development program was suggested and kind of prioritized by Mountain Metro Transit, but we're open to suggestions, and the amounts can probably change as well, because those aren't as set in stone. And then same with the roadway development. That was developed by CDOT as a suggestion, and then TAC also had some changes and suggestions to the new updated roadway list. And so that's what we have here. And I'm happy to hand it over to Rob Fry to discuss how the roadway development program was developed for the proposed suggestion. Go ahead.
Welcome, Rob.
Yes, thank you. So apologize for the quick turnaround on this because it was very quick. We got direction right around the very end of August, early September to develop this program list for like Tim was talking about, this group of pot of money for SB 267, Senate Bill 1, and 262. And so we're really looking at that $1.5, $1.6 billion list over the next 3 years. And so it's a quick turnaround. So we met with TAC and CAC, I think, on September 12th, kind of brought them a rough list, and then worked with that group to take that list and then prioritize them. So what you're looking here, the top 6 projects are actually in priority order from what came out of the TAC, and then anything below that are additional projects that were identified, but they're not in particular order. So I think the big thing to take from it is the top 6 is what the TAC-CAC reviewed and is recommending to as a priority for this funding. And then the way these projects were kind of put together, we're given direction to look at safety projects, asset, and mobility, and then really larger, not insignificant, but smaller projects. Look at larger projects, generally over about $5 million. So that's what we started with, and then we met with the group, and now we're here in front of you today. Happy to answer questions.
So we're on page 62, attachment 4 to item 6B. 6B, attachment 4. It's the one page with the multicolored top on it. This is a prioritization of 1 through 6 for projects we're asking for approval of the board today. Any other discussion? And Stan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And obviously, the comment I'm going to make here isn't going to be able to change, the conversation about these top 6 projects and what we ultimately vote for. but I know that Rocky has heard me say this many times. That transportation is a system. And if you don't simulate that system and do 1,000 what-ifs through that simulation, it's very, very difficult to heuristically, using elected officials, figure out what investment profile gives you the best value generation for that system. So I keep asking this question, and I'm hoping that the state, working in concert with the MPOs and, kind of a statewide process, to be able to get to that investment that allows us to do that 1,000 what-if simulations to figure out what kind of investment delivers the best output. Kind of illustrative examples. You could fix an interchange with grade separation, and that's expensive, but it could actually positively affect other interchanges nearby because you're fixing that one interchange. So any one of these single projects has these secondary effects that can produce value or maybe actually cause a problem. So I'm just hopeful that we will get there. And I know, Rocky, you and I have talked about it, and I think the state is working on getting closer to something like that. But I think that's really important for us to continue to work towards. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So, amen to that. We absolutely 100% agree. We have developed at the state level our statewide travel demand model, which we hope will get to put us in a position to better answer some of those questions. Now, when you say what ifs, that's exactly what a model's intended to do. Now, that model is only as good as the incisive questions we can ask it, right? But there are things that models can't do. So I always put brackets on this, right? Like, it's very hard for us to determine through modeling when we do an expansion or a capacity project how what's the induced demand? What's the latent demand for that corridor? We can get close to it, but it's not always kind of as holistic as we want. But I can promise you that at the state level, it's something that we take very seriously, and we're tracking to the best of our ability to be able to do those things more effectively, to look at the system objectively, use data to help shape that conversation.
Yeah. Cammie.
Thank you. Sorry for the newbie question here, but can someone speak to the process by which the CAC and STAC ranked these?
So I wasn't present, but
we have representatives from the CAC and TAC. I think maybe we can step up. But Rob, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll start, and then while Brandy's coming up here, she can
Thank you.
jump in. So a lot of these projects are in process already. So that very first project up there, State Highway 21 research, that was already on the 267 years 3 and 4 potential list out there. The next one is a portion of what we submitted for the build grant here just last month. This is not the full build grant. This is really the CDOT assets there. It's State Highway 94, which there is not funding for currently. And then I-25, reconstruction of I-25, and then extending the ramp metering. I think that one was elevated. Maybe Brandy can talk about that one as well. And then Fillmore to Garden of the Gods, trying to look for that best bang for buck. And then we also looked at the State Highway 21 Divergent Diamond Interchange, and then widening of US 24 East, which is in a PEL. So, Brandy, do you want to speak more about how the TAC and CAC came up with these?
So Brandy's the chairman of the TAC.
Good morning, Brandy Williams, Chair of the TAC Committee. We were presented a list that, hi.
Got it. Go ahead, Brandy.
We were presented a list that came from CDOT, and so my first question when the meeting started is, can we tweak, can we adjust, can we make comments, and they were very open to that. So the initial list came from them. A few conversations that we had is there was actually an item on their original list that didn't need to be on this list, so we took that item off of this list. And then when we did that, that moved up the ramp metering because it was in that vicinity. We left the Fillmore Garden of the Gods overlay. That was basically kind of the end of the top 5. We discussed Space Command and any needs that they may be looking for. So that is how the State Highway 21 Airport DDI interchange moved up, because I think it was 115 project moved off. So this one we added on. And then the county mentioned that this was a big priority for the US 24 East widening, so the TAC agreed to add it to the bottom of the list, realizing that if we get the top one, we're doing great. If we get the top two, we're doing fantastic. And then if they can sneak in that $6 million project, we're doing good. But this way, we're trying to get those priorities that we feel are important to the region higher up on the list.
Okay. Holly, and then, I'm sorry, Turner first, please, and then Holly. Holly, just a moment, I'm sorry. Turner, please, he was up to first.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Turner. And Rocky? Okay.
Okay. So on line 2, those are 2 separate projects then?
No, it's one group of projects.
Right. 3, maybe.
Yeah, it's actually 3 on there. It's State Highway 94, I-25, and then the South Academy bridges. The I-25 bridges that go over South Academy. It'd be one group of projects.
Okay.
3 separate projects, but one packaged together.
Okay, good. Holly, and then Rocky, please.
Yes, on item number 3, I believe it was Highway 94 out by Trash Hill, was part of the safety. And the question I have, and I do appreciate the TAC giving me a heads up on putting the airport DDI interchange back on here. And I'm still so excited that Research Parkway is first on my list. What was State Highway 21 and Constitution ever on here? And if it was, why did it fall off? Because it might be, it's one of the busiest areas on Powers Boulevard. I love to get more money up on Dublin, Stetson, and Barnes. We may seriously want to consider Constitution is probably closer to being ready to have a bridge over it. Just because, and it's a mess always there, too.
And Commissioner Williams, just so you understand, we didn't rank anything after that, so we really just talked about those top 6, and everything after that is just in an easy order for CDOT, so there's no ranking in that regard. So
yeah, it's not on the list at all, which is odd to me.
Okay.
So maybe we need to add another gray line with that intersection.
Okay.
On that, regarding that intersection, it's possible that that isn't ready to go, whereas the 21 and Research interchange has been pretty much designed and is closer to being ready, and which is one of the criteria for these funds. But we will definitely check on that and make sure. Is that?
Yeah, and then fixing that interchanges causes kind of that ripple effect along that corridor, because you have interchanges on the other side that need to be grade separated as well. So that's part of the considerations, that network and making that system work. But point taken, we can look at below the mark.
Commissioner Scott, and then
If I may add some context, as we've discussed before, one of the reasons this is so hard is there's over $2.5 billion. The difference between what we need in state highways for El Paso County, I'd suggest in the next 10 years, and what we have is over $2.5 billion. So it's very hard to fight over the table scraps, although we have to do that because that's all we have. Secondly, Stan and I, or Commissioner Vanderwerf and I talk a lot about systems. I have the unfortunate background of being an engineer, and so I think everything works based on numbers. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more than that. The reason all of us are around a table is that the other appropriate question is, what's the perception of equity across the state? There is not a single part of the state that thinks it's being fairly treated. And I mean, you get it, right, because it's a small pot. One of the big issues that the Commission is concerned about now is because of the typical prioritization process that has taken place and the extreme growth in Colorado and the increase in congestion, there are a lot of rural roads in this state that haven't been touched for 20 years. And this year we're saying we need to probably think about overweighting the rural roads a little bit. And as Commissioner Steen was saying, last year, the 25% rural, which is counties 50,000 and under, we included rural interstates. And this year, we put on the Commission said, let's take a look at the formula and see how the numbers come out if you take rural interstates out of that allocation. That leads to another whack-a-mole problem, and that is that and I was talking to Andy a little bit earlier, if you take a look at the total amount of money that we're looking at potentially putting into rural areas and surface treatment, the industry, there's a serious question on the part of a lot of people about whether the industry can actually do the work and whether the materials required, particularly aggregate, are there. So how this ultimate distribution takes place, I think, is going to require a fairly realistic look at those things, including the possibility, and I'm just speaking for myself at the moment, but I think we've had a lot of discussion about this, about spreading this over time a little bit more to make sure that prices don't go crazy and that we can actually get these projects done with the available supply, the available materials. So this is an extremely important conversation, and I will second what Commissioner Steen said, and that is, I think the Commission as a whole will not act without a very clear and deep understanding of what the stack process has delivered. As difficult as it is, imagine 11 commissioners trying to sort through the same list and come up with an answer. So we appreciate hearing what communities think is their priority. We think it's essential.
Turner, and then I'd love to hear from the CAC comment. We had a conditional approval. If someone from the CAC could speak after Turner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard before about managed lanes, one type of which is tolling. I was watching C-SPAN the other night, and they were talking about a project in Florida which made use of managed lanes, and that was tolling. They had a gentleman on there speaking who was a CEO of a company I used to work for. And it was a large trucking company. And they asked him if he paid any tolls, a large trucking company, and he said yes. We paid $25 million in tolls last year. And they asked him if he favored more tolling. He said no. He said when the opening statements were made, and the first opening statements were that the fuel tax had not been increased since 1993, the federal fuel tax. He said he wanted to jump up and cheer. And he said if that were done, it would raise $325 billion for infrastructure. And I'm wondering why this isn't done, and if we shouldn't take a look at, with, for example, our legislative body and things like this that we reach out with, why we don't make an effort to reach out and use whatever minute force we might have to try and get a federal fuel tax increase and raise federal fuel tax. Think what $325 billion is if you split it amongst 50 states. That's a big number by the time it comes down to 50 states. If you bring it down to that's over $6 billion per state, just on a rough average. So I'm just saying.
Well, actually, let's save that comment for 6C, because we're going to talk about legislative next. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, then, so you can skip me. You can skip me at 6C.
We'll just put that on the side burner for now. We have something from CAC. Conditional approval on this recommendation.
Jessica McMullen, I'm the staff member for the CAC. Our vice chair had to step out. He had another meeting. The CAC felt like they did not have enough time to review the items, and so they really wanted the chance to dig in and review all of the items that had been presented in the agenda. That's why they voted to do a conditional approval, and their thought was that if there were any opposition, they wanted people to ask questions, to move forward, and the complete and 100% response was crickets chirping. Nobody had any problems or any concerns that they addressed with staff members to bring up. That's why there was a conditional approval, and that's why it was approved.
That's going to stay. Okay, very good. Brian Matuli from MNT on Transit. Comment.
Good morning, Brian Vituli with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit and first Vice Chair of the TAC. I just wanted to speak a little bit to Commissioner Bremer's question about the ranking of the Transit Development Program. So this is the second iteration that we dealt with last month at the TAC. Page 54. The list prior to that is the one that we developed last spring and last summer in anticipation of the ballot measure that was going to the voters last fall. So the second iteration, it includes some projects that were added. What we wanted to do was to be consistent with our internal capital improvement program. We have a 3-year capital improvement program. So there were some projects that were added on there, such as solar panel installations on our bus shelters and on the buildings of our transit campus. Enterprise assets management tool that works with our management operating system for our system, a new downtown circulator proposal following up a plan that we did. So we're trying to be consistent with our internal planning, but also the top 3 projects, the ADA compliance accessibility project, the transit ITS enhancements and transit planning studies. These were projects that were just submitted to PPACG as part of their 2045 call for projects. So these are new projects that are hopefully going to be in the plan and hopefully funded. So we were looking to be a little bit more holistic and add to the list that we developed last year. And to Council Member Thompson's comment about electric vehicles, we're already moving toward a pilot program. We have funding through the Volkswagen settlement funds to purchase 3 electric vehicles initially. We have another federal grant that we should hear about next month on 2 additional electric vehicles. So we're looking to do about a 5 or 6 vehicle pilot project before we go all in with battery electric buses. So we're not really too concerned that it's a little bit down on the list because we're already moving in that direction, and the results of the pilot study will determine how we move forward with that.
Okay, good. Catherine, anything
Thank you.
else? What's on the other comments?
That addresses part of my question, Brian, but I guess the other part of the question is how flexible are these rankings?
Well, from our understanding, these are lists that will be revisited frequently. This was done at the request of CDOT. They wanted us to get our priorities updated and projects added to the list. So I think it's probably something that it's a dynamic list for both of these, I imagine.
I just like, if you get funding for a smaller project that's like number 20, you could move it up, right? If you didn't get the whole funding for a larger project?
Yes, that's correct. And similar with the roadway project, if we're not awarded enough money to get the top priorities on the list, they can go down the list and down in the ranking as well.
And Mr. Chair, if I might just...
Go ahead, John.
I want to make sure we specifically answer that question. The board is the authority of record for this list. So you are going to be the ones that adopt it. That means that obviously if you want to change the order, if it's something that you want to move higher up or you want to move it somewhere lower, that's totally up to you. And that is something that you could do at this time if that's what you so desire. Again, given the dynamic nature of the process, again, it's pretty much going to be sort of, it goes into this bigger hopper of CDOT projects statewide that the Transportation Commission will review. And so it's probably best to make sure that we have sort of that number 1 project that sort of is what's leading. I think if we try to come in and say, well, these are our 10 best projects, and they're all terrific, our voice is going to be somewhat diluted. So to the extent that we can just have agreement on the first one or two projects, make sure that those are forwarded into the process, that's great. But again, the list gets forwarded on, and it's totally up to the board here. If you want to change any of the orders, we can do that, and whatever is in the motion you make today will be in the list that we send off to CDOT later this afternoon.
Okay. Any other comments, Ben? So our options this morning as a board are to adopt the 2019 changes as proposed. A second option would be to deny those changes and stay with the old list, the 2018 list, or we could say, go back to work, we need more. Those are the three options. We do have a proposed motion in your packet to approve the 2019 updates to the transit and roadway development programs. That's your proposed motion. Any further discussion?
I'd like to propose that motion. Yeah.
Motion's made by
Second.
January, what, the second, to approve the 2019 updates to the transit and roadway development programs. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to understand exactly what we're voting on. There's so many papers here.
So there's 4 attachments.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're voting on all the attachments.
Correct. The prioritization as presented in 4 attachments.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's attachment 2 and attachment 4 are the updates.
Okay.
1 and 2, or, sorry, yes. 1 and 3 are the previously
Old
approved
list, okay.
list.
Thank you for clarification. So
3
2 and 4 are the updates. If we deny this motion, then we'll go back to attachments 1 and 3. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Isn't this fun? We have a motion to adopt the changes as proposed for 2019. Any further discussion? Stan?
Yes, thank you. I'll be voting in favor of this, but I continue to make the point, it's really difficult to really know what are the best projects and what are not the best projects. And one last point to make with regard to that, it's something the city has, the community has needed for some time. I call it the half-circle loop, limited access highway in eastern Colorado Springs, and parts of that is also in El Paso County. So, again, getting to this process of doing evaluations and doing what-ifs and comparing projects against each other, that kind of a project might help do a whole lot of other cost avoidance. There's 3 big projects worth over $200 million on the lower part of this list that talk about I-25 enhancements, but if we could have that second limited access highway in eastern El Paso County, these other things, the value of that might be to take pressure off of I-25, but in addition to that, take a lot of pressure off of cross-city transportation, which is people living on the east side of the city trying to get to I-25 to get to the highway. So that could actually help on local roads as well. But that comes now to the point of trying to simulate that and get to numbers so we can be better informed. So I still think that's really, really important for going down the road. And not having that ability to do that today, I'll be supporting it. I look at number 1, and I think that, if I understand correctly, the 21 research interchange, that is supportive of that half-circle loop on the eastern side.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the best we can do at this point.
Well, it really highlights the work that the TAC and the CAC and our committees do.
Yeah.
The representative...
And to trust in their research as best they've been able to do.
The work that who sets the table for us today are these folks, right? The menu that's brought before us for dinner, essentially, is this list. You like? So it's very important this board supports the work of the subcommittees. Attend those meetings if you can. Provide guidance at the member government level to bring those items through the TAC to the full board for adoption. So I appreciate your comments, but it really highlights the work that all has brought to bring this item before us today. Any further discussion? Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That's adopted. Thank you.
Commissioner?
Yep. John?
And I'll be brief. There was a question about process. I just want to make sure that I think it would be helpful to make sure everybody understands transportation projects don't get thought of one day and then implemented the next. There is a process by which these things go through, and it usually starts at area plans or corridor plans or whatnot. Then those plans, as they get developed, or studies, come up with some sort of recommendation. Those recommendations then sort of lend themselves back to be identify these projects that get into the long-range plan, and then as those project get into the long-range plan, and funding gets developed then to take them from the concept into more of a realized project with cost estimates. So you usually have to go through some sort of NEPA process to identify where those are going to go. After they become then more of a project that has sort of a real-life sort of skeleton around them, then you sort of move to that next step where you start doing more advanced construction problems, and then you find all the funding. There is no projects here today that you saw on these lists that aren't in the long-range plan or consistent with the long-range plan. So it's important to understand that when we come to you and we talk about doing regional studies and regional corridor profiles, all that information is used and informs the long-range plan, and all that information in the long-range plan and the modeling within the long-range plan then informs the project selection and the programming of those dollars. So it's all a process, and unfortunately it's a very long and complicated process, but to the point that we can do those things and plan in advance so that when CDOT comes and says, hey, we've got some funding, we want to make sure that this piglet has a name and it doesn't become bacon, we then have those projects lined up and available. So we didn't just find out about the money and said, let's start all over again, everybody give us your projects. It's, hey, we've got such a funding shortfall and we have such a large amount of projects, we had a lot to choose from, and then it was back to what does the Transportation Commission want to look for and sort of then make sure that we have projects that are meeting that need. If they came back and said, don't give us anything over $10 million and make sure that they're all congestion relief projects or all safety projects, well, again, we've got lots of projects that fit that bill, and we could have gone back and done that. So just so everybody knows, it's a long process, but unfortunately, we have such a shortfall, we have lots of projects that are ready to roll. And I apologize, I know it wasn't on the agenda, Mr. Chair, but I thought it was good to go back and make sure that the process question got answered.
That's what we're about. Andy?
Yeah, just also worth noting that this big pile of bacon is completely unfunded.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, it's a dream.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Not funded yet. Okay.
We have bacon next meeting?
Jessica?
Good morning again. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. I'm here to talk with you about the Board Legislative Committee.
Item 6C. Open that agenda. Go ahead.
So, each year, the Legislative Committee drafts the annual policy statement on legislative issues for the Board to approve. They meet weekly during the legislative session or as needed to review legislation as it comes up and to work cooperatively with our lobbyist to ensure that PPACG is working for all of our regions and for the needs of the programs you all support. Each year, and this is something that I may not have had us hit every time, we are supposed to officially appoint members of this committee. So, we need, at today's meeting, people who are interested to volunteer themselves to serve on the committee, and then we will request a motion to appoint those members to the committee.
So our current members, well, the number is not determined in our bylaws. Its purpose is, is it determined in our bylaws, the purpose and the role of how the legislative committee functions, Jessica? Are there some boundaries and functions?
To help develop legislative bills, develop position statements, either supporting or not supporting proposed bills, laws, regulatory actions, and other initiatives, meet with elected representatives and lobbyists in order to communicate PPACG's positions, and to testify before legislative boards, bodies, and commissions while we work with other similar agencies in formulating legislative positions.
Great. And just a reminder, advocacy is a strategic objective of this organization. Andy, you got a comment?
Well, I was going to volunteer to continue to be on the that legislative committee.
Very good. So we have last year's, the current year, and this can change. We have Councilmember Pico, Commissioner Elsner, co-chair, Commissioner Vanderwerf, co-chair, Councilmember Thompson, a member, and I served on that committee as well. 5 members currently. Let me just, by show of hands, let's just take around the table people who are willing to serve on that committee. 1, 2, Turner, 3, 4, the same committee, plus Holly and Jill. Myself, that would make 7. We had two co-chairs last year, Commissioner Ellsner and Vanderwerf. Would you both willing to serve as co-chairs again, or any deference to, okay? Can you serve as co-chairs? Take that as a head nod. So I will take that as a self-nomination. We have 7 nominees for the Legislative Committee. Is there a motion to accept those nominations?
Motion to approve.
Okay, on those 7. Is there a second?
Second.
For discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have a 7-member Legislative Committee.
Can I get a review of those names, just
So,
to make sure I didn't miss any?
Williams, Steen, Gabler, Pico, Turner, Smith, Elsner, Thompson, and Vanderwerf.
Okay,
around
thank
the
you very
table.
much.
Okay, and then we'll let our co-chairs then would be Elsner and Vanderwerf. You would notify the committee, set a schedule, and determine the first meeting date in coordination with staff.
And our first meeting date is scheduled for October 24th at 3 p.m. So October 24th at 3 p.m. here at PPACG is the first meeting to review the legislative priorities for 2020 in coordination with our lobbyist, Lauren Furman.
Yeah, one of the projects we did last year was legislative themes. You check with legislators in Denver, they carry this in their pocket. We'd like to continue that theme, that process, and of course, so the work begins, 2020 legislature starts January 8th. All right, thank you. Comments from members of the board, any thoughts? Stan?
Yeah, just very briefly, I appreciate you bringing up the legislative themes packet that you just showed there. Maybe most everybody here knows this already, but just to make sure, that was wildly popular with our delegation. They really enjoyed it. There's about 10 major themes, and they're just general guidelines, but my understanding is they use that extensively for what was considered to be PPACG priorities. So I think the first order of business, if Mr. Elsner concurs, is to review that document, update as necessary, republish as necessary, and use that for this next legislative session. Thanks.
A component of that is the cell phone numbers and emails of key members here. And I can tell you, I got texts mid-session from the floor saying, where is Pikes Peak on this issue? That happens. So.
Very powerful.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you for 6C. That concludes our action items. Item 7A, discussion, PPCG proposed 2020 budget draft. And let me just say, last year, this came up as a discussion item, and the board acted immediately to approve. That could happen today, subject to the board's pleasure. Casey.
Thank you. Casey Partridge, Finance Manager, PPACG. This is item 7A in your packet, pages 67 through 74. I wanted to go over some of the highlights with you. Attachment 1 is a detail of the revenue and expense lines, what's in there, and the percentage of what's in the budget. Attachment 2 is a spreadsheet of the departments and shows total and increases. Grant revenue has increased. We are projecting an increase of $666,779. Andy?
It's an intriguing number. I'm sure the devil is in the details.
It is, and we've spent a lot of time on the details with this. This budget is presented by me, but it's from the managers of all of the departments that put this together, and we've worked diligently the last few months to come up with these details. Table 1 in attachment 1 shows the breakdown of the grants and where we receive our money and the differences between our 2019 budget and what we are requesting in 2020. We are requesting a staff increase of 0.1 FTE. Last year we had 35.9 FTEs. This year we're requesting 36. And you can see, if you have gone through the work plan for 2020, you will see the staff positions all laid out for you. We are moving an open transportation position to our AAA department for a new mobility coordination position. This will coordinate with the city, with our providers, and with PPACG on mobility issues within the area for our seniors and other citizens. We are asking for a total of $141,567 in staff increase. This is 4.23%. This includes a salary pool increase of 3.2, and we anticipate a 10% increase in health insurance. That may decrease slightly, but we want to make sure that we've got enough in our budget so we don't need to come back to you for a budget adjustment. Dues are staying the same. You can see that in Table 2, and we, on Attachment 1, we discussed this at last month's meeting, and that was brought to you to take back to your cities and counties. There's been no increase in dues since 2016. We have budgeted for the state lobbyist for the legislative committee of $20,000. We've also budgeted $42,000 in capital projects. We'd like to upgrade this conference room, electronics, to make it easier for you to participate and see what we're discussing, and also for others in the audience. We've also added some funds for improving the doors upstairs. They're not meeting the safety codes that we need them to meet, and for some bathroom improvements upstairs. There's been an increase in depreciation of $11,000. This is with an anticipation of a $300,000 HVAC project that we're going to need to do next year. The Freon that we use is no longer available, so we need to upgrade that. $46,000 of the building increase is also to write off prior HVAC systems. That was set to depreciate over 40 years originally, and the system has not lasted 40 years, so we need to write some of that off. So if you look at Attachment 2, you can see what each of the departments are, including the administrative department, local resources, the RTA, which we help support and run, and all of the different departments. Line 1 and 16 has an increase due to a new phone system we were planning on getting next year. Our phone system is not up to the needs of the organization. And also in line 16, there's increases for computers and a GIS server for transportation to store data for internal and external uses. Any questions on the budget we're presenting?
Questions, anybody? Comments?
Mr. Chair, just one brief comment. Casey mentioned the mobility coordination position would be a new position, and that's not approved officially yet, but we've had some conversations with the city. The city's asked us to kind of take over that coordination aspect of how some senior rides, specialized transportation rides are scheduled. We provide funding through the AAA. There's also PPRTA money that flows to MMT that also goes to service providers, along with some other federal funds and FTA funds. The city asked us if we'd be interested in coordinating that and maybe taking that over mid-year next year, which would be about July 1 when we would start that. So just had some preliminary conversations, agreed in concept that this would be a good way to go, but we would bring that to the board before we make a final decision on something like that.
Okay. So 2 courses of action here. One is to provide additional guidance to staff, changes to the proposed budget. The second course of action would be to adopt the budget today. Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy, would that be a pass-through situation or just additional expense for us?
Good question, and a little bit of both. There would be pass-through in terms of the funding that's provided through the PPRTA, FTA funds, and the normal AAA funds that we provide to the special transportation providers. We would have a process where we split up those funds and give them out to the service providers, kind of like we do with our tip for transportation funds right now. If it's federal, state, regional, local funds, they've got to be shown in our tip. So we would have maybe a similar process like that, where a good portion of that would be passed through. But part of that would be us paying for a position as well to help coordinate that entire process. We think that can be funded with a grant through FTA, so we're still researching that, and that's really kind of how we put the budget together. It really wouldn't come out of other funds that we have. But a little bit of both, mostly pass through, but we think we've got a way to pay for that position.
Okay. Other comments, questions? What's the pleasure of the Turner? Go ahead.
I was just going to move to approve.
We could.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We could. That's a motion to approve the budget as presented. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Andy?
Sure. Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time going through this, and I'm comfortable seconding that, assuming that the rest of the board is comfortable with having just this little bit of a review.
Right, so for discussion here, again, we do not have to proceed now. We could be a no vote, presume that would move this budget back to action item next month. A yes vote would adopt the budget as presented. We have a motion and a second to adopt. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We have an adopted budget.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. The next item is, again, for discussion, item 7B, 2020 work program. This is how staff works, what they focus on, how the day-to-day workflow goes. This, again, is presented as a proposal, a draft, which will be adopted once again in November by action of this board. Jessica.
Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. This work program is designed hand-in-hand with the budget. They inform each other how they're going to work. What the budget is going to have in it is what the work program says we're going to do. So these are a program that is created each year, designed for us to line out specifically to our board members what the major actions and items for 2020 will be. The one thing that I do want to kind of first I should probably see if anybody's got questions, but the one thing I really do want to make sure everybody got the chance to see and pay attention to is the agency-wide key initiatives. Again, these are proposed. Board members may change them if so desired, but we've got a lot of great actions and great things going on, and 2020 is a great year for us to, maybe call out 20 things. And those items are lead the creation and growth of the age-friendly Pikes Peak portal to show resources available to seniors throughout the region, to increase service and support to underrepresented senior populations, to increase efforts to raise awareness of services provided for senior residents and their families through the AAA and service providers in the region, conduct public education campaigns around senior issues, elder financial exploitation, consumer fraud, and abuse in the Medicare and Medicaid programs, coordinate the adoption of the 2045 Transportation Plan and provide community education around the transportation funding challenges identified, pursue opportunities to provide transportation planning support in the non-urban parts of our region, engage in discussions on mobility statewide, including Front Range Rail and extending Amtrak's Southwest Chief service to the region, prepare and adopt a new federal fiscal year 2021 to 2024 TIP with greater project implementation coordination with local jurisdictions and CDOT, convene regional stakeholders for a transportation safety discussion, create an information sharing platform to facilitate the exchange of plans, studies, and related documents between the jurisdictions and public, coordinate GIS and other data sharing in the region, coordinate with the region's specialized transportation human service providers for effective coordinated service for seniors and other individuals with mobility challenges, convene area planners for improved forecasting and information sharing and improved coordination between transportation and land use planning, facilitate implementation of key aspects of the joint land use study around the region's military bases, coordinate improvements to the region's air quality planning efforts, including restructuring the Air Quality Technical Committee and educating the community on ways to voluntarily reduce ozone emissions. Following adoption of the Water Quality Management Plan, undertake efforts to educate the community about the plan and related water quality efforts. Coordinate with the Legislative Committee to refine legislative priorities and continue engaging with and educating legislators regarding regional needs. Coordinate with regional partners on a successful Census 2020 count. Coordinate with the board to update their strategic plan. And prepare internal PPACG policies and procedures around a variety of topics: IT needs, meeting material preparation, board orientation material, and internal work culture. You will notice there's not a single one of these that does not align with the strategic goals that you approved. They are all intentionally designed, much like the budget. The work plan asks us, how do we relate to what you said you wanted us to do?
Big to-do list. Wow. Okay. Comment, Andy?
We didn't want to get too schmaltzy with it, but we, like Jessica mentioned, kind of wanted our top 20 for 2020 that we're going to kind of stretch goals we're going to try to achieve for this year. So we're going to keep these front and center and maybe report on them on a regular basis here, but also in our quarterly reports that we send out to the community. Well, we'll rethink it then. But,
All right. Comments, questions? This is for consideration. Just a reminder, this has not yet been through the CAC. We have not had a comment from the CAC, so consider that and whether we move to adopt this now or wait till November as currently scheduled. Other comments, questions for Jessica, Andy? Okay. Okay. Is there a motion to adopt, or want to? Is there discussion? So there's no motion. Yep. Okay. So seeing no motion, Andy. Seeing no motion, we'll continue to put this on the plan for November's action item through the CAC. Yes, Holly?
I just know our CAC really works through these things, so
They
I
do.
definitely want them
They
to
do.
look at it.
Yeah. So, very good. All right. That concludes our discussion items. Military reports is next. Item 7A. Colonel Baird, do you want to start us off, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Rob Bearden from the United States Air Force Academy, and on behalf of General Severia, it's a pleasure to be with you. It is a busy time of year at your academy, so I've got several things to update you on and just make you aware of. This Saturday at 5 p.m., we return to some home football following a stinging loss to Navy last week, unfortunately. So expect some traffic impacts probably starting around the 3 p.m. time this Saturday. Next Thursday, the 17th of October, Colonel Linnell Latendra will be promoted to Brigadier General, and she will assume command as our Dean of Faculty, replacing General Andy Armacost, who retired just recently. Following that, on the 26th of October, Saturday, we will return to home football again. The time of that game is yet to be announced for television, so we'll see what the traffic impacts look like based on time of day. On the 28th of October, we'll begin hosting Corona, which most of you are familiar with, is our forum where all of our 4-stars and 3-stars come together. Expect no impacts in the local community, but we will have some traffic impacts on the installation during the week of Corona starting on 28 October. An important event is happening on Friday, the 1st of November, that I want to make all of you aware of. We will name our airfield in honor of General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. on that day. If you're not familiar, General Davis was an original member of the Tuskegee Airmen. He was the first 4-star African-American in the United States Air Force. So we will name the airfield on that day, and then I wanted to make sure you were aware we're having a historical colloquium that day from 1:15 to 3 p.m. On the Academy. That is free and open to the public, and we'll have several distinguished presenters discussing the Tuskegee Airmen, General Davis, and their role in World War II. Finally, wrapping up that week of Corona and the airfield naming, Saturday, November 2nd, we return again to home football versus the United States Army at 1:30. As you all are aware, that is probably our most, it is our most attended game. It'll be a sellout crowd. And so that game is at 1:30. I would expect traffic impacts that day beginning probably around 10 a.m. Pending any questions, that is your update from your United States Air Force Academy.
The collisions will occur on the field.
You hope. Let's hope.
Well, one can hope. Okay. All right. Thank you. Ron from Shaver. Good morning.
I already have my tickets for that Air Force Army game, so we're pulling for Air Force at Schriever Air Force Base. Just a couple of, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to comment. Just a couple of things to highlight from Schriever. Today, the Fountain Police Department and our own 50th Security Forces Squadron are conducting active shooter training at Schriever Air Force Base. The training includes building entry, room clearing, those sorts of things, and it's designed to broaden our training tactics, streamline potential law enforcement aid and mutual support, and also to build those connections between the department and our own base defenders. Schriever Fire Department also teamed up with local fire departments on 30 September to extinguish a grass fire between Curtis and Blaney Road. The fire started about 1 o'clock at the Blaney, and because of the high winds, picked up quite rapidly, but was certainly extinguished by 1800. Just highlights the benefit of having mutual aid between our department and the surrounding communities to make sure that we can protect lives and property when it's required. One item to mention, as the fiscal year closed out, our contracting squadron was very busy. They rounded out the year having 204 contract actions, along with about 297 contract modifications, for a total of $107 million in contracting at our installation. So certainly, that rounds out the fiscal year. We're getting ready to run with the next fiscal year and anticipate that they'll have the same workload as we try to execute the missions that we've got at Schriever Air Force Base and fund those things that need to be done. So subject to any questions, that's all I've got from Schriever Air Force Base.
Questions for Ron? Colonel Johnson, welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to everybody who attended our State of the Wing a couple weeks ago. Appreciate your participation and continued dialogue. We've got a new commander in place, and Colonel Moore is still in town. If you want to say hi to him, he works in Space Command for Mr. Cox down at Space Security and Defense Program, so he's still here if you see him at a cocktail party or something. Also, thank you to the transportation folks in the city for working the stoplight outside our gate, East Gate on Mark Shuffle. That went up pretty fast, and it's supposed to be done by the end of this month, and so I think that will make Mark Shuffle traffic a lot safer as cars come cruising down the road southbound down the hill. So really appreciate all of your work on that. Also, thank you to the transportation folks. I thought we had a really productive meeting last month talking about our North Gate. And so the main topic of that meeting, both county and city transportation were there. And the main point of the meeting was to sync up our efforts for our work for reconfiguring our North Gate, the traffic inbound to the North Gate, for improved security for the base. And sync that up with your efforts outside the base with some roundabouts and some things like that to improve the traffic flow. And so we have a study that was approved. It's going to take about a year to do all the study because there's so many organizations involved of how we're going to reroute traffic there. And then the second, probably the main thing came out of there is, in addition to syncing up efforts to make sure that we don't have some weird base plans that don't match with your plans on your road. So in other words, we don't want to move our North Gate over to the east where you all don't plan on having an exit off of Highway 24. Then you would have it'd be almost like a bridge to nowhere. You would have a gate to nowhere, so it wouldn't make any sense. So I appreciate all of that dialogue and syncing up our efforts there. And the last part, looking forward to one of the work study plans was a joint land use study, and appreciate all of your participation in that. And I think that team works really well, and I think we're synced up pretty well. So that's all we have going on, other than the 24/7 missile warning operations around the world. And you all have about over 200 people deployed from Peterson Air Force Base around the world. So we'll keep busy all the time, and still no news on the U.S. Base Command basing action, and we keep looking for that, and go Air Force beat Army. Army can go next.
Army can go next.
All right. Hal from Fort Carson, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. It'll be a great game. So if you don't have tickets, please come. I'm looking for a really good game this year. Just a couple of things from Carson. One is we had a change of command. General George changed over with General McFarland, so he's in place. First week of him being in charge, and should be with us for a couple years. Also, I'd mention one other thing. Rod Chisholm usually is the primary representative here. Rod retired last week. I think you knew that. And Andy Bird has taken his place. So I think you'll see Andy coming to the meetings, and I'll be his backup.
For Mr. Bird. Yeah.
Right. He took over the same office, so hopefully it'll be close. I just mentioned a couple other things. 3rd Armor Brigade comes back before Thanksgiving. That's 4,000 soldiers plus or minus. That'll be coming back to Carson, which will actually put everyone back at Fort Carson over the holidays until we get into deployments next year. So there'll be a bit of an increase in population. 2 projects I just wanted to mention. One, Teller Dam. It's a large earthen dam just at the boundary on Fort Carson, but at our southern training boundary with Pueblo West. We awarded that project last year, and that work will start fairly soon. But that's a large earthen dam for us. We have a no storage requirement from the state of Colorado because of the condition of that dam, and this project will fix those problems we've got. And then the other one is, I just continue to want to thank this board and CDOT and others on the transportation side in supporting in that CDOT build grant the Charter Oak Road that comes up off of exit 128, I-25 up to Gate 19. Over time, that's going to be continued to be more important for us to make sure that avenue coming on and off Fort Carson gets to the point where we see a lot of traffic on it, because it's going to reduce the traffic that comes off the interstate and out of Fountain into Gate 20 every day at the south end of our cantonment area. So that's the report from Fort Carson. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The city of Fountain would request that when the 4,000 troops come home, that you guys not change the PT report time at the same time like happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
That it was right at when the kids were trying to go to school
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. So we would kindly put that request in.
Yeah, there's no discussion at this point to change that time, so.
All right, very good. Well, again, thanks for your service, gentlemen, to the country, and please pass on our gratitude to those you serve with. Okay, move on to, Terry, any comments on the MAC?
The MAC has gone through its procedure for new board members that take effect in January. Those names have been announced, and next month I'll tell you who the chair is and give you the dates on the MAC Christmas party as well.
Oh, good. Good, okay, thanks. Reports from our committees, Transportation Advisory. Brian, you still here? No? Oh? Okay, quick update from the TAC. Do we have the minutes in your packet?
Good morning. Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner. For TAC, they approved or recommended approval for the long-range plan, and then also recommended approval for the transit and the roadway prioritization list that you all saw earlier and approved. And so those were the main topics there. We also are discussing further items on TIP project status and making sure that those are moving and progressing, and that's pretty much the extent of the discussion with that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, just a personal, so I have on my to-do list, meet with my TAC members periodically, so that's on my list, and I just encourage you to do that as well. Meet with your TAC members to make sure that you're connected and channels are open. All right, thank you. Community Advisory Committee, Jessica.
Thank you very much. The Community Advisory Committee met, and you already heard the only real controversial topic at the meeting, which they discussed and made a conditional approval for the item that the board has approved. Otherwise, committee meetings go well. We're still missing an appointed representative for the city of Colorado Springs, despite the fact I know they've got at least one really good nominee. I still have not received an appointment from them. And Teller
I'll
County
check.
Teller.
has also not given me a representative.
I know, got it.
Nobody else here I can shame right now, so.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jessica. Regional Advisory Council, Jody?
Good morning again, Chair. Dave Betzler sends his regard. He's ill this morning, so he asked me to fill in for him. So just a quick update on the last month's meeting. The RAC recognized Joe Urban's retirement with a lovely plaque and cake and a lovely send-off to that. But some discussion around the carryover. The state has not announced the carryover yet, so we're just waiting on that any time. Those of you who may be familiar, or our primary funding source as the Area Agency on Aging is the Older Americans Act, and that's currently under reauthorization conversation. It's currently stalled in the Senate, and those folks are now on a break. So we will hope to hear soon. Right now, the primary holdup is around the funding formula and the hold harmless initiative. Some of our eastern states have not had the growth of our western states, and so there's a lot of discussion around that and what that will look like. So we're hoping to have that resolved pretty soon, and that continues to get updated to the RAC. The RAC is also has some openings for new members, as well as our chair, Dave Betzler, going off. This year, he will continue to have one more year on the RAC, but has to step down from his chair position. So any other questions about that?
Question for Jody? Thank you. Okay, the next item is CDOT monthly update. Karen Rowe and Shane Ferguson both unable to attend today, so we do not have a CDOT update. We had a great discussion from our folks earlier in the program. Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee, I'll give that report. I was privileged to give the STAC report to the commission, and therefore represented the commission report back to the STAC. So I represented the views of the Transportation Commission, reported back to the STAC as the STAC vice chair last meeting. It was a fairly short meeting because we had spent an hour farewelling this retiring state CDOT engineer, Josh Lapley. I believe that his replacement's now been named. I can't think. Rocky, do you recall the new engineer's name? Put you in the spot. No, okay. But we do have Josh Lapley's done a great service. Pardon me? Steve Harrelson, yeah, thank you. Steve Harrelson is our incoming state engineer. So if you have a chance, welcome him in if you happen to see him or see not. Please give my regards from PPACG. One item I thought was of interest was the emergent mobility study, or a branch, an office has been opened in CDOT headquarters to address the emerging technology among transport. We have autonomous vehicles, of course, still down the range, but there's also a whole range of other options, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the ride sharing, the peer sharing. You can put your car and make it available open, just like a VRBO. Do that with your personal vehicle. That kind of technology is available. And CDOT is at the high program level is looking at trying to address those emerging mobility modes on statewide traffic and mobility. Rocky, any comments? You just opened a new committee at the Transportation Commission to talk about that.
Yeah, it's we've started a mobility systems committee with the notion that at the end of the day, our objective is mobility, without being, agnostic as to mode, and that includes a recognition that mobility is, going back to the systems conversation, there are a lot of issues that impact our ability to provide mobility, land use decisions, which you and I have talked about, and I don't think we're doing a very good job right now, frankly, to anticipate what kind of mobility requirements we have and think about ways to fund them. In addition to just the overall long-term issues of sustainability, and we have an opportunity, I think, to look at surfaces plus transit plus the different services that you're talking about, Norm, and different financing methods such as the high-performance transportation enterprise much more systematically than we do. And, the conversation we were having earlier about the amount of money available, I think, makes it essential that we find ways to do that. We're up in Teller County yesterday. Park County yesterday. Yeah, I know. You look surprised. I thought, why would he be surprised? He was there. Wrong county. No, we're in Park County yesterday, and CDOT gave a report, and over the next, 25 years or so, there's going to be at least a 40% increase in traffic through Park County. Dick's anticipating that. He's opening a lemonade stand right there at 9th and, Yeah, so, but if you look at our funding plans, I just don't see any conceivable way that we're going to be building highways to accommodate all of that. So the issue of transit, I think particularly rural transit, becomes that much more critical. So this committee wants to look at a very high level, do a lot of global benchmarking around behaviors related to transportation and the like, and technology, and start trying to influence the Commission's role to set policy for the state in transport in a much more informed way.
Yeah.
Probably TMI, but thanks for
No,
the-
that's good.
And I did get the county rate finding, so that's good.
For example, I mean, what happens when vehicles don't park? They just deliver. They're moving all day long. The demand for parking, including at the airport and other places around communities, is going to drop significantly. They could. And, the transition between drop-off. How do you queue up? All these vehicles are no longer parking. They're just dropping people off at shopping centers. That queue-up places have to be reconsidered, rethought. And congestion will change. That's right.
I'd like to add one more thing, if I may, and that is, there's one seemingly so obvious opportunity that we don't do well yet, in my view, is we desperately need truck parking for inclement weather. We need a lot more transit-related parking. We desperately need to improve our rest areas. There's no reason why we can't co-locate some of these things. And right now, frankly, we're making those decisions on an individual site location basis. So some of this is low-hanging fruit, and we're going to try to take a deeper look at it.
Very good. Okay, so that's the staff report. Move on to Executive Director's report. Andy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be real brief. Just two items quickly. We have a transit coordination quarterly meeting coming up with Council Members Avila and Thompson. Be joining us, meeting with MMT to kind of continue our transit coordination discussions, and we'll report that back to the board at a subsequent meeting, probably in November. And the other thing I wanted to mention, probably should have brought this up under the air quality discussion, and not to go backwards here, but one thing I want to bring back in the next month or so is official designation of PPACG as the lead air quality planning agency for ozone. I think we've talked about this before. It's been a couple of months, but we have the official designation. It requires an executive order to be signed by the governor. We have to work it through CDPHE. We have that designation for carbon monoxide, since we used to be in non-attainment for carbon monoxide, but we're now pretty much out of that through one more maintenance year that we have. But we don't have that designation for ozone. And I think given everything that's going on, even though we heard good news today that we bought ourselves a little more time with a really good year this past year, we really should have that designation occur, and we'll need to coordinate on what that language looks like. I don't think it comes with a lot of strings attached. I think the things we've been doing over the past year are the things that the state would expect, like convening with our technical committee and doing outreach and coordinating with the state and things like that. But I'd like to bring that back for some discussion and direction at a future meeting, maybe next month.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Eddie?
Well, who's the official designation now for this region?
That's a good question. We don't have one. And if we default to not having one and we end up in ozone non-attainment, I think the state would be the ones that would take the lead. And I think we'd rather have some more local control and have us kind of coordinate what we do with our stakeholders rather than the state doing that. I mean, there might be some other options where, if the county was interested in taking the lead, that could be a potential option. But I think we've got I think with Samantha on board now and with our committee in place and the work that we've kind of established already, I think we've built some muscle memory to kind of continue that effort and pursue that designation. So I think it makes sense for us to take the lead with that.
I think it makes eminent sense. I thought we were, but...
Okay.
We thought we were too, to be honest with you, until we looked up the records very beginning of this year and found that we were designated for one, but that didn't cover other pollutants for whatever reason.
So is that action at CDPHE, or it's not here?
Action here to initiate that, but then it has to go through CDPHE, then it's signed by the governor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Questions for our director? Great. Thank you, Andy. All right. Member entity announcements, quickly around the table. City, REMA, military community, kind of got those, I think. Sharon?
I actually have one, and I'd like to clarify something. I actually participated in a press conference yesterday with some environmental people and some state elected officials on the PFAS issue. The impression that's being given by the news is that obviously there's more money we need, right? It's a huge problem. But the impression that is being given on the news is that there is no interaction. So I did read a press release yesterday, and I do have additional copies to it. The press release, of course, again states that fountain water is non-detectable, less than 2 parts per trillion, and that we do have I talk too fast, sorry. We do have agreements in place with the Air Force. It's continuing to help us. In fact, we're building in Aga Park right now. We're building a new facility for that, and the Air Force is paying for 95% of it. We're paying for 5% because we wanted to put a bathroom in it, basically, and for the guys that are going to work there. And the Air Force would pay for the building, but not for the bathroom. That's okay. That's our choice. And but anyway, so if you need a copy of that press release so that you know that we do have good relationships in force, and of course we're trying to look for something long-term, but Bennett's office, Lamborn's office, and Gardner's office, and our state officials have all been very helpful with this as we continue to work through this process. So as you see the little bits on the news, the water is safe. That's always my fear, is when the groups come in and they try to say the federal government's doing nothing. They need to understand that that causes panic among our citizens, and they need to know their drinking water is safe to drink. So, thank you.
Good. El Paso County, any updates for us? Remember anything?
One.
Holly?
I just wanted to say, and this was pretty awesome, we had our Veteran of the Year award. We had 4 amazing individuals, and I lost the website, so I'd have to report maybe another time who won, but this one guy, I believe Charles Watkins, he has greeted more than 90,000 returning soldiers to Fort Carson. It literally brought tears to my eyes. And so I just thought that was so cool. Don't think that he's missed one forever. So, but it was a very inspirational ceremony. So thank you to all our veterans and all our active duty.
Mr. France, I think, was their awardee. Mr.
Yes,
DK.
Mr. France.
Yep. And his wife Connie represented him. He was in D.C., I think, doing some amazing things, right. Meeting schedule, just a reminder, our next meeting on November 13th will begin at 8:30 for consideration and moving to executive session. Regular meeting beginning at 9 a.m. Any further business before the board? Time is 11:38. We're adjourned. Thanks, Norm. Yeah, welcome.
So anyway, the one thing I've learned, I'm the county party officer here. Of course, they haven't really attacked me yet. Well, there's two sides, there's two factions. She's a really good person. Secretary, she's just a really